meeting minutes, and this would have been for April 13th. Do we have anyone to move a motion within the Planning Commission?
Commissioner Hours, I move to approve the minutes for the April 13, 2022 Planning Commission hearing.
Second.
Okay, we'll take a vote. Vice Chairman Martin Trujillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Daniel Hours,
Yes.
Commissioner Ray Egley,
Yes.
Commissioner Sean Zernico,
Yes.
Commissioner Greg Collins,
Yes.
Commissioner Tony Peck.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. The first item on the agenda within the public hearing and recommendations will be the Thompson Thrift Residential Final PUD Plan. And at this time, I defer to staff for the presentation.
Yes, good evening, Planning Commissioners. Tonight it's for Thompson Thrift Residential Final PUD Plan. The site is located off of Jackson Creek Parkway between Strata Drive and Harness Road. It is part of Village at Jackson Creek approved preliminary PD site plan. The approved preliminary PD site plan was identified as mixed-use development with a variety of retail, employment, multifamily, and other commercial uses. Tri-View Metro District will provide both water and wastewater services for all development within Village at Jackson Creek. The existing surrounding uses include Monument Marketplace North, My Storage at Jackson Creek, and Jackson Creek Senior Living. The final PUD plan is 13.14 acres in size. It consists of 264 multifamily residential units. The units will consist of 1, 2, or 3 bedrooms. There will also be a clubhouse, pool, fitness center, open spaces, and a dog park. There'll be 470 vehicle parking, including garages and ADA stalls. The building height is 48 feet. The access points will be at a full movement at Strata Drive. It will be at Strata Drive and Grand Village Drive, both full movement. There'll also be a future intersection, the future signalized intersection at Jackson Creek Parkway and Harness Road and Jackson Creek Parkway at Strata Drive. Once these are warranted for a signal will be put in place at these 2 intersections. And these are a rendering of 4 building types. They have 4 building types in nature for different color design palette that the applicant will be going over in their presentation. And this is their clubhouse elevation. In the comprehensive plan, there's a few opportunity and land uses under the comprehensive plan, and Thompson Thrift will provide the live and play out of the live, work, and play environments for Village at Jackson Creek's mixed-use development. There will also be, Thompson Thrift will provide common areas such as a fitness center, a pool, amenity areas, dog park, and open spaces within their development. There'll also be a diverse mix of retail, employment, multifamily, and other commercial uses in the approved preliminary PD plan. Provides wide variety of development options that meet the changing needs of the community. And Thompson Thrift falls within the multifamily residential use. There will also be amenities for transportation such as sidewalks and bike lanes. Thompson Thrift will also be providing soft surface trails and sidewalks throughout their development to incorporate our trail system that connects to other trail systems within our town. And there'll be separated walking and biking paths provided by Village at Jackson Creek, and Thompson Thrift will provide soft surface trails and sidewalks throughout the development under this policy under transportation. And staff recommends approval of Thompson Thrift Residential Final PUD Plan based on the findings that the proposed final PUD plan is in conformance with the review and approval criteria of a final PUD plan as outlined in section 18.03460D, which is in front of you tonight, of the Town of Monuments Land Development Code. Next, John Romero with NES will be presenting on their portion of Thompson Thrift's development tonight. It's going to bring up their presentation.
All right, good evening, Commissioners. I'm John Romero. I work with NES. I am representing Watermark Residential, which is a company of Thompson Thrift on this application for a final PUD site plan tonight. I think I'm the guinea pig on this. I need to point it. Not looking like it. There we go. There we go. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. All right. As Debbie had mentioned, this site is located on a 13.14 acre site. Oh, here we go. Just south of Jackson Creek Parkway. This is a part of the Jackson Creek, or Village at Jackson Creek planned mixed-use development that's recently been approved for a preliminary PD site plan. This project, just for a little bit of background, was zoned PUD as part of that preliminary PD site plan, which was a 46.97 acre mixed-use development and incorporated the retail, employment, commercial, and residential uses. This site is identified on the comprehensive plan as a mixed-use development, which specifically looks at a mixture of non-residential, residential development for convenience, for uses such as convenience, goods, services, employment opportunities for the residents. These mixed-use land uses are actually identified as part of on the east side of I-25 as noted in the comprehensive plan. These past approvals with the PD site plan for the Village at Jackson Creek mixed-use development specifically identified those three uses that we discussed and a density of up to 20 DUs per acre. As Debbie had mentioned, there are access improvements along Harness and Strata. Strata was previously Cloverleaf Drive. These roadway improvements are looking to be built by the master developer, maintained by TriView, and then there'll be metro districts which maintain the streetscape, which covers some of those amenities that Debbie was talking about for the increased pedestrian access. With that preliminary PD site plan, there were established development guidelines that dictated setbacks, landscaping, signage, and just overall landscape or development guidelines. As mentioned, this site is a 264 unit apartment project in the Village at Jackson Creek development, a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units along with a variety of amenity spaces. Currently, the site is vacant, and the building height that we were proposing with this application today is 48 feet. With the Village at Jackson Creek development, there were 2 building heights established based on the proximity to I-25. So there was a zone 1 and a zone 2. Everything in zone 1 was within 600 feet of I-25, had a maximum building height of 75 feet, and everything outside of the 600 feet had a 50 foot building setback. And again, with ours, we're only proposing a 48. With this too, as part of this, you'll see that we've oriented the buildings kind of east-west to take advantage of the views, which is an important part of this project too. The building setbacks for this provide a 20-foot setback along Grand Village and a 20-foot along Strata with a 50-foot on I-25. As Debbie mentioned, there's 470 parking spaces proposed, including garages and ADA stalls. Of those 470, there's 96 garage spaces. All right, so as discussed, the access is provided with a full moving off Strata Drive to the east and a roundabout with on Grand Village to the south. Drainage does provide 2 full spectrum detention ponds on the east side of the property. Utilities are provided by TriView Metro. This development is proposing 4 acres of open space, which meets the open space requirements for that. Along with this development, we are looking at landscaping and amenity improvements to go with this site. Watermark Residential is, as mentioned, a Thompson Thrift company, is a Class A multifamily developer. They put specific emphasis on upgraded interiors, energy efficiency, and amenitization in their properties. And as part of this recent kind of efforts, they've even increased their focus on post-COVID design, which has led to the emphasis on flexible and dynamic spaces that look to improve outdoor amenities, community spaces, as you'll see in the provided application. Some of the amenities that are proposed with the development include a clubhouse with a clubhouse and pool with grill areas, fitness center, dedicated mailroom, community dog park that's kind of centralized in the development and surrounded kind of around by some garages. a common open space closer to Grand Village. And then as mentioned, there are garages, community garages, and a community trash enclosure with a screened enclosure. With this application, there are 4 building types that are being proposed with this development. Each of those elevations have 2 color options with them too, as you'll see. So you have option 1 and option 2 that are provided with each of those. Along with that are the garages and the clubhouse and fitness center, which complement the aesthetic of the other architecture provided with the development. I won't go over all this policy compliance, but we did find that there is alignment with many of the policy framework of the comprehensive plan as noted. Supportive of the policy framework, the proposed development incorporates complementary land use variety, increased opportunities for live, work, play options by providing a balance of supported housing with commercial and mixed use developments provided with the village at Jackson Creeks, added amenity improvements to add to the usable commons areas that are on site and easily accessible. And in addition, improved and enhanced street sections for increased multimodal options, both with the trails internally and then the improvements that are going to be happening with Grand Village and Strata. As you know, there are 9 review criteria that are part of the PUD development plan. We feel that all 9 of these criteria are met through the consistency that is shown with the past preliminary PD site plan, the incorporation of the variety of architectural types and styles, the quality landscape design that's provided throughout the development and the menus that are provided on site, and the consistency with the context of the comprehensive plan that's envisioned for this land use pattern in this area. With that, I will open up for any questions, and I thank you for your time today.
At this time, are there any public comments? And before we get to the public comments, what I'd like to open up is those individuals that are online will go ahead and raise their hand. If they do raise their hand, obviously let us know and we'll go ahead and make sure that their voices are heard. Those individuals that are here in the auditorium, those individuals here, please go ahead and come on up to the podium. I'd have you sign in and then go ahead and make your comments. After that's done, then we'll have the rebuttal with you, sir, and then we'll go ahead and continue on. At this time, it is now open to public comment.
I'm Steve King. So this is kind of a combination because I wasn't sure exactly if you were going to combine this and the next hearing on the site plan together. So I'm just going to say what I have to say and, you know, just apply this towards the next one as well, because this is partly to do with both. So PUD is a created zone district unique to itself with its own rules and regulations, where the town allows flexibility within the municipal codes and allows a town to establish standards and controls. It is a negotiated zoning where the landowner can request multiple uses within one parcel in exchange for amenities for the town. It does not negate the purpose of the comprehensive plan or the municipal code. This project was originally denied approval by this commission due to the urban density or urban design and high density. When this rezoning was ultimately approved by this commission, it was approved based on the site plan rendering calling for a mix of commercial uses and showed a main street with shops, residential uses, and a hotel. The applicant stated that the main street in this development was how they arrived at the small town feel concept. The apartments that were talked about at the time were 252 units. Because of the massive buildings, the conditions that were set forth by this commission were to include step back building heights as the comprehensive plan calls for, and as the code requires for commercial development in the Regency Park developments. The other conditions included a 25-foot setback from Jackson Creek Parkway as required by code, and this development substantially resembled the site plan provided by the applicant at the sketch plan hearing, which is what I gave you. The conditions were rejected by the Board of Trustees. This PUD does not specify that the step back building heights be omitted. So is it assumed that the code will prevail, as it does not specify on this plan? The step back building heights are designed to scale back the building mass and to provide view corridors towards the mountains. The code also sets limitations on lot coverage. It currently states that lot coverage is 40% of the lot, including all impervious areas such as parking lots and driveways. While that might not be realistic for apartment units, The leading parking garages from lot coverage should not be permitted if they're going to negate the code as far as impervious areas apply. I'm not asking you to deny this request, but what I want you to do is plan for the future on this PUD site plan. The site plan on lot 4 will be approximately 17 acres in addition to this 13-acre site and a few other smaller lots. That will most likely be requested to become another apartment development, which would be 350 plus units. The comp plan specifically speaks of the community not in support of rental units or multifamily. See page 17 in the comp plan. At this time, we've allowed approximately 1,200 apartment units to be built here, or 35% of all housing stock. Obviously, that does not align with the comprehensive plan, and I'm sure you'd have a hard time finding another community with that type of density or percentage of rental units. Regency Park was originally specified to be 4 to 6 units per building. We need to start regulating the high density uses in our town. At the very least, I would create a condition that lot 4 be prohibited from more high density apartment units. These approvals for these projects are based on the presentation materials that are provided by the applicant first at the sketch plan phase, and they should be held to those standards at a minimum. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any additional public comment in the room? None at this time. Teresa, do we have anybody online, ma'am? Thank you. And at this time, applicants rebuttal, please, sir. Do you got anything or any words to say regarding what Mr. King had mentioned?
A couple of those I can identify as part of this project. So we are lot 1 of the Village of Jackson Creek's PD site plan, and so I can't really speak to lot 4. So I'll pass those on to the master developer and then the next presentation. But I can speak a little bit to the step back building heights. I think when the Village of Jackson Creek PD site plan was originally approved, it was approved with those different zones for the building heights, with the 75-foot within 600 feet of I-25, and then the 50-foot for everything outside of that 600 feet. We're 48 feet, so we're actually lower than that. Some of the original plans that you'll see to concept, which we're just concept plans, had some different building orientations. And with this, we changed our building orientations to kind of really take advantage of the view corridors that are allowed through there, through Pikes Peak. And so considered that as we did this layout. The other item I can speak a little bit to is the impervious area. We do meet the 40% coverage within the development for parking and impervious surfaces for that site. So hopefully that helps with some of those questions too.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
This will close the public comments at this time. At this time, we're going to go ahead and open up the commissioners' questions and comments directly to both, well, primarily to the applicant. At this time, commissioners, do we have any questions?
Help me understand the, Commissioner Zernico, help me understand the full movement future signalized area. That intersection at Harness and Jackson Creek right now is a disaster. An accident's waiting to happen, and continued on down, obviously further towards Baptist as well. I mean, you may not be able to answer this question, but what are I realize traffic studies and all that have to be conducted first before that can be determined on if when the signal is warranted. But I mean, we're talking 470 parking spaces. So I mean, you take 20% of that, and that increases quite a bit of traffic coming out of that Harness intersection.
So we do have our traffic engineer here, Jeff Hodgson. I can kind of give you a broad perspective. So the current traffic report that Jeff had put together for Harness, the signal warrants weren't met to put in that signal. But once those warrants are met, as development moves forward, that signal will come on board. But currently it doesn't meet the warrants that it has. And I believe once the signal goes in, it will be have a level of service of A or B once those do come in. So does that help, or do you want a little bit more on the discussion? I can have Jeff kind of give you the details of the numbers and what those numbers are, if that'll help. But kind of the broad perspective is those warrants haven't been met yet with the current development improvements that have happened. But each time as these PD site plans come in, we'll have to show that we haven't hit those triggers yet. And so as development comes in, it'll show whether or not those warrants have been met and whether a signal will be required.
And I believe he's right behind you, if you'd like to answer that question, sir.
Jeff Hodgson, LSC Transportation Consultants. So just to, first off, the two streets that will connect to the project are Strata will also connect is my understanding. So, and most of the reason for the need for a traffic signal is with respect to the traffic from this particular project is rather than not so much cars turning right at an intersection where there's a signal, but traffic turning left. So from this project, you'll probably have more traffic going up Strata to make a left onto Jackson Creek up at that intersection is probably more likely. Now that said, there are some that will use harness as well. And it's my understanding that the master developer is looking to program for that signal in the first phase. So, you know, as soon as that signal, he's able to put it in, it can go in. But in order for it to go in, it has to meet warrants that are established by the Federal Highway Administration, by their nationwide warrants. It has to do with traffic volume on the major road and then how much traffic is turning from the side road in order for it has to meet those thresholds in order to, I mean, they're guidelines, but most jurisdictions follow those because they don't want to put in signals that haven't met warrants yet. So basically it's probably the signal may meet warrants, you know, for traffic coming from the east side before it meets warrants for traffic coming from the west side. So depending on how much traffic is coming from the east side to turn left to go south on Jackson Creek, that may actually meet the warrants first. And that can be monitored over time as far as, okay, what are the current traffic numbers, you know, as development occurs and as traffic on Jackson Creek increases, as well as traffic from that side and from the west side. So it's either one side or the other will push those warrants over. So the bottom line is the signal's programmed to be put in, but it's got to meet those warrants. And then it's traffic demand that drives those warrants. So, and with growth happening so quickly, it's probably good to monitor those, you know, on a regular basis so that you can see when those warrants are met. So.
Commissioner Zernico again. So when was the traffic study conducted for the current state?
It was done fairly recent. It was last in March. I'd have to look and see when the actual counts were done.
So let me ask this, Commissioner Trujillo, I guess my question would be, with the industrial growth of that and the actual traffic that's going to be coming in, traffic trucks, big trucks, industrial supplies, everything along that lines, is that also an account with the FHA identifying those standards to ensure that traffic is there? My concern is the pedestrians, just as Commissioner Zunica's here.
Yeah, I mean, it's the warrants are guidelines. So, you know, local jurisdiction can make the call on whether a signal is warranted or not. You can apply a truck. Sometimes it's common practice to apply a truck as a factor of 3.
Yes, sir.
Vehicles, stuff like that. So that could be taken into account in the warrants. But with this particular project, these are more, not so many trucks at this point, you know, for the first phase, if you will. But so it's probably more just residential apartment traffic, and, you know, with this first phase coming online. So are you talking like north-south traffic?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hours. So how is the traffic managed from this point to look toward the warrants? I mean, what happens? We've got the study here, but how's that going to occur to make sure that the traffic doesn't get ahead of the warrants? That makes sense.
Would you like me to answer or for you? Yeah. Oh, okay. This is, I'm sorry, I forgot your last name, Monica. Yeah, she's with Thompson Thrift. So the traffic study currently, what Jeff mentioned, is for the everything that's on this side. It's not just Thompson Thrift Residential. It's actually Monument Marketplace North, and what the potential uses could be in the future. So even with that, it doesn't show the signal. However, town staff just recently had a meeting to go over the civil drawings for Estrada and Harness and Grand Village Drive. And we are designing Harness Road to be signalized in the future because other development will be happening. This is not going to be built overnight. Other development will be submitted soon, will warrant this signal to happen sooner than later. So we are designing that intersection now to be signalized. Just want to help with that.
So Commissioner Hours. So Debbie, can you explain how does the town, the second part, the question was, how is the town going to monitor that? And I think part of that answer too is as additional developments, specific developments come in this area for site plan review, that traffic study is further refined. And that is a document. Those are documents in the future that will assist the town in monitoring the warrants and the traffic. So we have a general traffic study now that kind of talks about this site specifically and the background trips. But with each future site plan, there needs to be a refinement of that says this is the specific use and this is how many trips. And that may specify the trigger happening.
Of when the warrant will be when this intersection will be signalized and when Strata will be signalized too in the future. So when those projects come in, that's within Village at Jackson Creek, the next project, or within Monument Marketplace North that comes in, they will be submitting a traffic study and it will tell us if the signal is warranted or not. But we're preparing right now for it as staff and with the applicant.
I'll just add that the north connection does provide some relief for the current intersection. So that is also reflected in the traffic study. So there's going to be two connections at this point that'll provide relief from our development. So that also will be taken into account as far as when the warrant hits. But in the interim condition before the warrant comes in, there will be some relief on that intersection because there's a new connection point coming in.
And your name was Megan, right? Monica. And Monica, what do you do?
Development manager.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we understood and have that on the mic as far as you being here. Thank you. Any other questions, gentlemen?
Commissioner Hours again. I've got a question for the staff, and that is the reduction of the setback from 25 to 20. What was the thinking?
I'm going to have John talk about that.
That 25-foot was on Jackson Creek Parkway. Yes, sir. Yep.
My question's also for staff. Commissioner Trujillo, my concern's density. Initially, when we started talking about this project, we had the heights, we had everything there, but it's just what is the public had stated, we're at 35% across the board with apartments in Monument. The small town feel is no longer there. By building this or something similar to this, and as I look at the overall plan, my question is this: the future of this project, as we start looking at this with phase one, future phases, what objective or what is the plan of Monument in relation to, is it going to become an apartment safe haven for all these entities to come inside Monument?
With this project in particular that we're talking about tonight, a preliminary PD site plan was approved for multifamily, for one multifamily unit. This is the max that they could have there, and they're providing that. So that was an approved use within there, and they're meeting the density requirement from that preliminary PUD site plan at the time. Now it's PUD.
Yes, ma'am.
They're meeting that approved use within that preliminary PD site plan.
My question back to staff then is, within that comment, is the staff able to handle the volume of people at 264 units at this time in that location with the amenities that are currently in the town, to include road work, sanitation, water, school, and everything associated with it. Obviously, it was approved, but my question is, again, in the future, as this continues to grow, how are we going to adjust for that in the future and, again, alleviate or alleviate the whole small town feel?
I'm going to take a stab at this, commissioners. Megan Harrington. So when we receive a final PUD plan, the site plan, which is what you're reviewing this evening, we send it to all of the referral agencies, basically asking for them to comment, just as you've said this evening. If it's the school district, can they handle the students? If it's, police, I mean, sanitation, the water, all of those referral entities are sent the plans and they comment. Staff wouldn't bring something forward to you if, say, the school district said, no, it's way too many students, we don't have that capacity. Instead of assuming for this site, the school district said, we would like fees in lieu of a land dedication. And so a fee is paid with every unit. And so that is how staff determines if those services, as you said, can handle this amount of people. This is an interesting argument about multifamily. In this particular case, zoning and the preliminary PUD have already been approved. I think that's different. I'm going anecdotal now. I think that's different than when you have a future development that comes before you that doesn't have zoning and is asking for a new zoning for multifamily. You have a different set of criteria in those cases. And so I believe in this preliminary as a whole, is this the only multifamily that can be within the whole preliminary? Is it maxing out the number of units? I mean, I think that is a question within your question, right? You said this is the density of this particular apartment site as we see it on the screen, but
Yes,
the
ma'am.
preliminary PUD is a larger area, and does it allow additional dwelling units? I guess that is a question that I can't answer. Perhaps Debbie can, to give you a sense of perspective related to overall permitted units.
Well, let me ask another question to staff then. What is the definition of multifamily in relation to acreage, and what can be placed on that land? What is the limit?
Was that multifamily residential use shall be subordinate to non-residential uses.
Okay. So what, again, my question back to staff is, what is that number? What is multifamily in relation to the total sum of apartments, houses, townhomes, trailer parks on what can be put inside there?
On this particular project itself?
But let's, yeah.
So the PUD, that's the PUD in and of itself. The PUD, preliminary PUD, sets its own zoning and design standards. And so for this particular preliminary PUD plan, I believe that he just told you what the overall density is. And Debbie, I would ask if there's a density range number or maximum number of residential dwelling units on this preliminary PUD. And then that's the maximum for this area specifically. But if you're taking that from this granular level to a monument town-wide level, right, that's a harder question to answer because of all of the PUDs set it specifically for the property. If they're already approved, they are all reading a little different. They're customized to that specific approval.
Completely understand. And that's what I'm really trying to get to. The heart of the question is this. Each one of them is specific. They get to lay their own little understanding of what those numbers are. The town of Monument, again, now being a small town feel, what is the direction from Monument? Are we going to become that small town feel? Because there's restrictions here at the Planning Commission we can put on this by telling them, okay, that multifamily is limited to X. What is that X number? Or is that a factor that we can actually place on it? The limitation of height is not the issue here. It's the number. It's the density.
And the number and the density, again, I'm going to ask Debbie or the owner, to tell me what is that maximum? Is there a maximum number on the preliminary PUD for this area as a whole, or is there a density range? But when the property was zoned and that preliminary approved, that preliminary PUD plan set that density. So if they come in and say, this whole preliminary PUD was allowed X number of units, that was already determined with the zoning and the preliminary, right? And so in that situation, I would say, you coming in at this site plan phase and saying that they can't have what the language is on the plan would be against the plan that's already approved. But again, since I haven't looked at this drawing for a while, I'd rely on Debbie and the applicant to say, what's the,
criteria. So.
But what was the number of? Okay.
This is Commissioner Egley. So in other words, going forward, it's possible we could have an additional 10 acres of high density residential because it would technically be subordinate to the entire development as you phrased it.
That is a possibility based on the zoning. As a developer, we're not going to put a competing use right next to another use like that. I could see a senior living, and I could see a townhome type product. I could see some other type of residential. It'd be in a mixed use development. I'd like to see, maybe retail with residential above, but I don't see another large 3-story garden style apartment side of this. But again, I believe what we're talking about tonight is a 13.14 acre site.
Correct. It's 13.1, but without a definite number of personnel or density inside that location. There was no defined entity that gave us a number of total residents that could go inside that density area or that area. Okay, so 20 DU per acre would give us what? Was it 250? Originally, it was 254. You're saying now it's 264.
Yeah, and that again was based on conceptual plans and quick.
Okay, so the final, then we can go ahead and discuss that now,
Yeah,
correct?
So
Very well.
What is the guiding principle behind the preliminary PD site plan is that density, and that's what we understood from that. Staying with that density. And then I think I don't want to get too off track here with the bigger picture versus what's going on with this site. But I do agree that density is an issue, right? Understanding units and understanding what the capacity is for development. And I think we've kind of answered that question in a couple spaces, is as these things move forward, they still have to be proven with traffic. They have to be proven with water, utilities, all those things. So as each application comes forward, especially when you start to think about the intersections of Harness and Strata Drive and Jackson Creek as a whole, those traffic counts have to be updated to deal with that. I believe when they did the original traffic report, the traffic only anticipated residential in this site. So as you move forward, you would still have to look at what that density means to the development, what it means to traffic, and how it impacts the overall PD site plan.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions?
Commissioner Howard, my question will not impact approval or disapproval of this project, but with the title Thompson Thrift Real Estate, what kind of range are we looking for the housing for people that need housing in this area?
It will be market rate housing. It's a Class A apartment development. It'll be called Alta 25-2, but it is market rate apartment housing.
It's still going to be expensive.
What is market range? Tell me in your idea, what is market range?
I'm not an expert in that, so.
Neither am I, but you seem to know the realty world. So again, give us an estimate.
I think we all have an idea of what that is. I think the market is very interesting right now, so it's hard to say.
And,
exactly.
and it's hard to understand because you're giving me generalities. So again, give me a market value, please.
I don't believe I can answer that officially, so.
Very well. Thank you.
Monica with Thompson Thrift can provide some of those.
Again, and it is the market. We analyze it and we do try to come in at or below market. I will say we also provide discounts because we like to have police officers on site. And so we do try to give them a discount to be on site. And there's other things that we do to try to get back to the community. But for the market rate, we're in the range. So we have 1, 2, and 3. So for the 1, we're in the 1,400 to the range is 1,400 to 22 to 2,300, depending on which bedroom and which square footage.
14, I'm sorry.
23. And again, like the market is the market, we pace it as the market changes, and we're all in this amazing inflated market. Yeah.
Good.
I understand. And then with the cost of materials going up, I guess I would maybe look to staff and say, you know, we are getting a lot of density here, which we have little control apparently on some of the density. I'm not just talking about just this project. But one of the things that we need in Monument is housing that our younger folks can afford. So in the future, how can we as a commission impact that so that when developers come in with residential units, we can at least get residential units that our people can afford, because we have a serious problem here. We have a lot of housing. The people in Denver love to live here. Good, let them buy the high expensive houses up there. I don't have a problem with that. People in Colorado Springs, but we've got a lot of young folks that need housing and we're not doing a thing.
I'm absolutely going to take a stab at this one. I believe on the work plan for 2023, one of the items that the new director is going to be looking at is an update to the comprehensive plan. Commissioner Trujillo even said, you hit on it this evening as well, the language about the small town feel, that future land use map. In the last 6 to 9 months, there's been a lot of discussion about the land use maps, the land use categories, what types of residential that the town of Monument wants to see. I can tell you that I believe that there are a lot of different outlooks on varied housing types within the town of Monument. I believe when I was in the office full time, I would hear some people call and tell us that they didn't like the small lots. Well, the small lots are a smaller price point. They may be a smaller home, right? That's how the price point is decreased. That they wanted the larger lots. The smaller lots or the pull apart townhomes on the smaller lots aren't appropriate for Monument, right? I hear you kind of saying, well, we need some choices for all. And different varied housing. And so I think that it's time to look at that comprehensive plan and really better determine what that vision is. But there is definitely varied opinions on variety of housing in the town of Monument. And I believe that the Planning Commission, as well as the Board of Trustees, again, need to have a joint meeting, which is again on the list, and you need to talk about it and kind of form that vision until a comprehensive plan rewrite can take place, right? Because that's money and time. But a group meeting, Planning Commission, Board of Trustees discussing that is probably overdue.
The only comment I'd make related to that is, I don't see, because I've been sitting here quite a while, where smaller lots are having any impact on the cost of housing to the folks that are coming in. They're getting smaller lots for the same kind of money that the bigger lots are paying. But we'll talk about that at some other time.
Absolutely. And we've had some what would be true affordable housing projects approach the town and while I can't speak for all of them, I can only speak for the one I know about. It wasn't necessarily received very well. And so again, it goes to that vision for the town and what that message is.
Any other comments, planning commissioners? At this time, we'd like to go ahead and motion to vote. At this time, are there any motions to approve the Thompson Thrift Residential Final PUD plans as prescribed?
.D of the Town of Monuments Land Development Code.
Commissioner Peck, motion seconded.
We will now take a vote. Vice Chairman Trujillo,
No.
Commissioner Hours,
Yes.
Commissioner Zunico,
Yes.
Commissioner Egley,
No.
Commissioner Peck,
Yes.
Commissioner Collins.
Yes.
So the vote is 3-2 and it passes.
Very well, thank you. At this time, we're going to go ahead and move on public hearings for recommendations for the Village at Jackson Creek filing number 1 final plats. Staff, I defer to you for the presentation.
Good evening, is Village at Jackson Creek filing number 1. Project is west of Jackson Creek Parkway off of Harness and Strata Drive. The plat is 46.973 acres in size. Village at Jackson Creek preliminary PD site plan and rezone was approved by the Board of Trustees on April 5th, 2021. There will be 4 lots, 3 tracks, and 3 streets. The streets will be Strata Drive, Harness Road, and Grand Village Drive. All streets will be owned by the Town of Monument and maintained by Triview Metro District. The lots range in size from 4.364 acres to 17.045 acres. Tract A is dedicated for open space, utilities, and drainage will be owned and maintained by Triview Metro District. Tract Bs and Cs are designated as streetscape tracts, will be owned and maintained by Jackson Creek Commercial Metro District. And Triview Metro District will provide water and wastewater services. The plat is consistent with the preliminary PD site plan, and staff recommends approval of Village at Jackson Creek filing number 1 final plat based on the findings that the proposed final plat is in conformance with the review and approval criteria of a final plat as outlined in section 18.02-260C of the Town of Monuments Land Development Code, which you have in front of you tonight. And Brett Benke with CSI is here to answer any questions.
Other comments? None?
Lot 1 that we have like constraints and the lot 1 bounded by strata. Other 2 lots 3 kind of separated by like a grade change, and that we likely see at lot 3 some sort of a retail office use there, and just left lot 4 lot. So, all of these will likely come back before you use a lot.
Thank you, sir. At this time, the public comments are open. Those individuals that are online, again, I remind you to go ahead and raise your hand if you have any questions. Inside the room here, first off, if there's anybody that needs to make a comment, please go ahead and step forward.
And gentlemen, while Mr. King approaches, I just want to remind you that we have a few controversial items this evening. When you're making your motions and you're either supporting or opposing, it would be great to put on the record as to why you're supporting or opposing based on the review criteria. You don't have to go down the number to every single one, but if there are a few that you felt it did or did not meet specifically, I think when you make your motion and put in your vote, either before or after, just put some additional information on the record as to why you voted a specific way.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
I'm Steve King. So as I stated earlier, because of the size of Lot 4 and because of the markets that we have right now, which doesn't really include much retail, doesn't include much office space, it seems like the two main uses that want to come here are apartments and industrial, but particularly apartments right now. I will say this, there is a stepping stone mechanism for people to get out of apartments or get out of their mom's house or whatever in order to move up into the real estate market. It's called condominiums, but there isn't any condos being built. And the reason mainly for that is because every condo project gets sued and insurance companies won't offer insurance. So they have to self-insure and they won't do it. It's just becomes a class action lawsuit. It's an easy target and these lawyers look for settlements. And that's the reason we don't have a stepping stone. So if these were for sale units, it wouldn't bother me so much, but we have so many rental units here on the books. I mean, you look at the town right now and it doesn't look like we have a lot, but they're on the books and there's 1,200 plus units right now coming here. So we need to somehow restrict these. And if the applicant says that they're not going to have competing uses on this site, perhaps we make a condition that there's no more apartments that go on this. And that's all I got to say. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Teresa, are there any other public comments online?
There are not.
Very well. Thank you, ma'am. At this time, applicants rebuttal. Any comments regarding the comments from the public?
At the family residence. Site is developed residential, you can't have a 17-acre site. So, yes, thank you for pointing out the construction defect is the challenge for developers to build condominium. After 8 years, they'll be converted once construction defect goes away. But until that changes, I don't know what to say about it.
Thank you, sir. At this time, we'll close the public comments. And at this time, so we'll go ahead and defer to the commissioners for questions and comments. At this time, commissioners, any questions?
This is Commissioner Egley. For Debbie, is there any constraint on the developer coming back in the future and looking at Lot 4 and saying, I want to go ahead and cut that in half and have multifamily residential on a portion of it?
They could come back and cut that in half for whatever use possible, but staff would have to review it and approve it to see if it meets the standards for the PD site plan that was approved.
Thank you.
Question for staff as well. Inside the whole plan for Jackson Creek, the village at Jackson Creek specifically, when we said multi-use, that was for the whole facility, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions?
Commissioner Hours, this is for staff. Any concerns about restrictions on what can go on here is not appropriate at this point, correct? It would
Correct.
when they come in.
It will, when it comes in as a final PUD, if it meets the standards of the approved PD site plan, then we will accept that use. We've had projects come in and ask about certain particular lots that don't meet that use, and we've had to tell them no. So that does happen. I just want everyone to know that we do say no to people if it doesn't meet the correct criteria.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
my other point is, even at that time, if the commission so desired, it could then put conditions to go forward to the trustees if there were concerns about what
Yep.
you had to approve, because we realize there are certain things you have to approve based on the criteria.
Yes, the purpose of the final plat is to complete the subdivision of land in conformance with town code. So the final plat is a subdivision action, not so much a zoning and site design action. But I think that, yes, next step, next site plan, staff's going to be looking at it, and that would be an opportunity to say, well, now, wait a minute, you've gone over and you are now no longer in conformance or consistent with the preliminary PUD, which is one of your findings for the final PUD plan.
Commissioners, any other questions? And during this time, can we have a commissioner just question and answer up here, obviously between ourselves, before we start setting those conditions? Is that a possibility? Perfect. At this time, now this is just discussion between the commissioners. Something to consider. When we look at this, obviously, as we start looking at the phases, that's my concern, and the density across the board. I'm looking at it in relation to, with this final plat, how is it going to be based off of, if we approve this motion, how is it going to be identified that the additional density is mitigated? Is there any other conditions that we would want to put on there in order to mitigate that in the future? My concern is this: in the future, as we look further down south off of Jackson Creek, or correction, Baptist Road, going down south towards the Air Force Academy, we're going to have development down there. We're going to have development in the central area here. Further areas are going to develop with an actual height range of up to 75 feet. There's nothing that's going to mitigate that. So the definition of multi-housing, in my opinion, would have to be defined sooner by later. The other part is, in relation to this, is by different phases. Right now, we're going to allow, or it's already been approved with a vote, that we're going to allow 264 units to go inside of phase one. My condition under consideration would be to vote approval of this with the motion that no additional housing associated with the multi-housing code has already been met. It has already been met in phase one, and that no additional phases will have housing due to density within the town of Monument. Questions?
So what's the definition of multi-housing?
We don't have that definition. But again, the question is, as we continue to kick this can down the road, it's a forcing effort to identify what is that answer. I don't have that answer, and staff doesn't have that answer. Trustees don't have that answer. But now we have developers that are coming in and saying, I'm going to continue to build inside our city, that we have folks that have been here for multi-generational housing, and now we're allowing the aspect of density to control our decision. I don't have the answer.
Commissioner Peck, to the staff, is that within our power to do? Since the preliminary PUD allows for this.
So a plat, a final subdivision plat, a subdivision action creates individual land. So with this action on the final plat, they're not asking or requesting to build anything. There's no site review to be had as you would with the site development plan. So any conditions on a final plat need to be related to the creation of lots, the creation of land itself. The lotting pattern here is I'm just looking at the review criteria. lot pattern is mentioned. Lot and development patterns ensure light and air. Plat design for adequate access, adequate, safe, and efficient public improvements. It's difficult to say if you were to try to put a density cap on a subdivision document, if that would be a condition that would hold. That would be something that I would caution against, because this is a final plat around the land. If you were to choose to move forward with a condition like that, we would absolutely get this discussion in front of the town attorney for verification. And then what would happen is we would have to send you an email related to the town attorney's input to staff on whether or not that is a condition that could be held to a final subdivision action.
Please.
I think you're 100% right on that. That's why we have you there. But I believe that we could put a condition, no further subdivisions of the lot. In other words, we would approve it as the lots are with no further subdivisions. I believe we could put that condition on there appropriately.
I believe that you could. I would, again, if you come with conditions, we would need to float them by the city attorney and have them vet it, and would get back to you a written memoranda related to if moving forward to the Board of Trustees, that the town attorney could recommend that condition stay on there. It would be a conversation back to ensure that could be done, but any condition related to land, I don't know what is to be accomplished if they have a really large lot, how they would then develop that lot. But I wouldn't say no that you couldn't.
Any other comments? All right, at this time, commissioners, what we'd like to do is go ahead and place a motion to vote. If there are any conditions, please let us know at this time. Nothing. I'm going to put the condition in, no further subdivisions, and I'll go ahead and do the motion at this time.
Now, be sure that are you saying no more subdivisions to any and all of the lots in this subdivision plat? Are you saying no more subdivision of one specific piece?
As the landowner had stated, the individual, all of it is one conclusive, correct?
No, this subdivision plat's going to divide it into four lots.
Okay, so that's
four
what I'm
lots
saying.
of varying sizes.
Yeah.
One of these lots is for Thompson Thrift.
Okay.
One of the four lots is for Thompson Thrift, and they have 3 lots left. If they ever want to come back and subdivide it, they have to bring it back to the Planning Commission if they subdivide those lots in the future.
But even
But
if
right now, they're not looking to do that, but you asked that question earlier.
Correct.
So
even if they subdivide it, they still meet the requirements by the current planning directorate to get the approval.
Yep. But they have to meet that don't forget, a plat has to be, a final PUD plan would have to come for that particular lot in the future, which will go to you since the PUD. And at that time, you can make conditions to that final PUD.
And any future subdivision actions come before the Planning Commission as well. So if this subdivision is approved as is, and the applicant comes back in the future and says they want to split lot 4 into 2 lots, that still ends up in front of you as well. But if you do go the route of the condition, I just want to make sure that you're very specific as to if it applies to all lots, if there's one specific lot, and that you're quoting your review criteria.
Obviously, that's going to take immense time. So what I'll do is we'll have the motion go through. And when it comes my turn, obviously, I'll make my vote and identify those individual deficiencies that I feel are not adequate to prevent or to actually subside.
Ready for a motion?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Hours. I move, I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of Village at Jackson Creek filing number 1, final plat, based on the staff report finding that the proposed final plat is in conformance with the review and approval criteria for a final plat as outlined in section 18.02.260.c of the Town of Monuments Land Development Code.
Second.
I'll take a vote. Commissioner Hours,
Is it at this point you want me to say why I'm voting for or?
So to clarify your motion, I did not hear a condition.
Condition.
And yes, when you make your vote, I think, again, you don't have to go too deep, but I would say yes and or no, and here are the criteria or why I'm voting the way I'm voting.
Basically, the reason I'm voting and went with the motion as it was is because we have an opportunity in the future to deny any subdivision that might come forth of any of the lots that would increase the capacity of the residential units in there. That would be my concern. And that's why I'm voting yes for this, because we'll have an opportunity at another time to say we don't like it.
Commissioner Zernico,
Yes.
Commissioner Egley,
No, and it's because I believe that the plat that's proposed does not propose and provide a harmonious development and lot pattern that's compatible with the neighborhood and community. So I vote no.
Commissioner Peck,
Yes.
Commissioner Collins,
Yes.
so the vote is 4-2. Oh, who did I forget? Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
you know my vote.
Vice Chairman Trujillo.
No, and that's due to the fact that the plat does not possess a harmonious development within the lot pattern and is compatible with the neighborhood and the community. The concern primarily is the density of the area to include the openness to continue to build inside that area and bring more density to Monument. So I vote no.
Okay. So with that, we have a 4-2, and it passes.
At this time, moving on, we're going to move on to Eagle Rock Distribution Preliminary Final Plat, PUD and Final Plat. At this time, I would defer to staff for the third item here within this hearing.
Yes, good evening. This is Eagle Rock Distributing Company Preliminary Final PUD Plan in Eagle Rock Subdivision Filing Number 1, which is the plat for the project. The project location is within Falcon Commerce Center off of Baptist Road. It's off of the locations odd to talk about. It's off of Woodcarver Road, but not off of Woodcarver Road. It's just on the other side of Woodcarver Road as well within the Falcon Commerce Center, and it's south of UPS. The part of Falcon Commerce Center approved of PD sketch plan. The approved PD sketch plan identified the area to be developed as mix of civic, industrial, institutional, medical, office, or warehouse distribution use. In this case, is the warehouse distribution use, as well as a commercial aspect, office aspect within this project. Forest Lake Metro District will provide both water and wastewater services for all development within Falcon Commerce Center. The existing surrounding uses include the Pilot Travel Center and Pioneer Landscape Centers and UPS. The project is 23.39 acres in size. The proposed use is office and beverage storage distribution. The building height is 49 feet. Building size is 262,500 square feet with a 10,000 square foot maintenance facility, as you can see to the right of the proposed building. They will have an outdoor patio, a trail connection to the Santa Fe Trail, and they will have a variety use of parking. Passenger parking will be 172 parking stalls. Box trucks, there will be 106 box truck stalls and 11 semi stalls. Hours of operation is from 9 to 5. The outbound trucks leave the facility at 3 a.m. and return from noon to 6 p.m. The inbound trucks are scheduled by appointment from 4 a.m. to 11 a.m. and receiving operations on Saturdays only. And here's a rendering of Eagle Rock Distributing Company. It's a lovely building. And the architect will be incorporate a mixture of uses such as synthetic stone, groove and wood softening, and steel beams will provide a mixed design, which gives the Colorado feel within the development here. And Eagle Rock Subdivision filing number 1 is 1 lot. It's 23.39 acres. It will be the lot for Eagle Rock Distributing Company. And it does meet the comprehensive plan. It has a mix of civic, industrial. The land use types will meet the changing needs of the community by providing a warehouse distribution use with an office aspect inside as well within the mixed use development of Falcon Commerce Center. There will also be a trail connection on the north end of the site that will eventually connect to the Santa Fe Trail. There will be an economic road extensions and linkages. On April 20, this past April, CDOT did inform town staff and the property owners around the area that a roundabout will be going at Terrazzo and Baptist Road rather than a signal. It will be constructed by CDOT within 18 months. It's currently under design and almost out for contract for construction. And they're keeping the property owners and town staff in the loop with the whole process going forward. And Eagle Rock will provide about 100+ jobs to the community. And staff recommends approval of Eagle Rock Distributing Company preliminary final PUD plan in Eagle Rock Subdivision filing number 1, based on the findings that the proposed preliminary final PUD plan and final plat is in conformance with the review criteria for the preliminary final PUD plan and final plat as outlined in sections 18.03 450D and 1803 460D and 1802 260C, which is in front of you tonight within the Town of Monuments Land Development Code. And then tonight we do have a representative from Eagle Rock that will be presenting their portion of their presentation.
At this time, do we have Eagle Rock for a presentation now?
Yes.
Sir, please come on down. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for the time tonight. My name is Steve Economos, and I am the CEO of Eagle Rock Distributing Company. I'm here tonight to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we are about. And we have a team behind me that can answer some of the more technical questions in terms of design, build, and things like that, if you have any of those questions. But the first part of the slide will be a little bit about who we are since we're looking to come and move into Monument. So a quick agenda, the introduction to us, our mission and philosophy, the history of who we are, why we're in Colorado, our consolidation plans, why are we choosing Monument, and then our community partnerships. So here's our facility in Georgia. We're a Georgia company originally, 3rd generation Anheuser-Busch family. My grandfather started corporately with Anheuser-Busch. He had the opportunity in 1981 to buy into a distributorship in Atlanta, Georgia, which is how we got on the distribution side. And now me and my 3 brothers are running the company. My brother over my right shoulder here, Mike Economos, is the president of Eagle Rock, Colorado. And I'll get into that a little bit more as we go along in the presentation. And I have 2 brothers that work back in Atlanta with me. I share time in both Georgia and Colorado operations. A little bit about our mission and philosophy, our vision. We are dedicated to our people and our customers we serve. Our mission is to challenge our passionate employee to use industry-leading innovation and world-class portfolio in our delivery of excellent customer service. Family, loyalty, community, and teamwork are our values, and our strategies to provide our customers with the best beverage portfolio serviced by the most talented force in the industry. You can see the family there, my father in the middle, my youngest brother to his left, again, President of Colorado. To his left is my brother Nick, who is President of Georgia. And then my brother Andrew in the pink runs sales in Georgia, and I'm the CEO. Here's what I just explained to you earlier. A little history of the company. So the company that my father came in 1981 had been servicing the Georgia market since 1930. We grew into Eagle Rock in 2000, and then last year we had the opportunity to purchase the Anheuser-Busch facility that encompasses most of Colorado. So here's the acquisition that we did in 2020. It's kind of hard to see the different there's two shades of red, but everything in the bright red was what Anheuser-Busch corporately owned. And then we also purchased a private company called Colorado Eagle, which encompasses the green part of the state. So that footprint covers roughly about 80% of the state of Colorado, with about 90% of the overall volume of the state. Why Colorado? My parents have owned a ranch up in Northwest Colorado for over 20 years. We've been coming out here as a family, hunting in the fall and bringing the kids out in the summer, and absolutely have enjoyed the state for over 20 years. We're very familiar with the market. The dynamics of the customer base here that we service is very similar to the makeup of Georgia. So we're very familiar about how to distribute and service our customers. Colorado is a fantastic place for growth. You guys spend a lot of time talking about the growth here. We are poised and ready to service the growing customer base and the growing customer need. Logistically, we have 6 warehouses now and service every customer that has an alcoholic beverage license. So that would be convenience stores, grocery stores, packaged liquor stores, and on-premise. But we are much more than just a beer company. We're a total beverage company. So we have non-alcoholic products, wine, spirits, and beer. Our value proposition to the customer, we want to be able to provide as much product to as many customers as possible to keep a solid foundation for our employee group to have a very solid job for a long time to come. So you can see our portfolio here. We're showing this because the company that we bought, Anheuser-Busch Corporate, was only Anheuser-Busch products. And in a short period of time, we've been able to add very solid brands and suppliers to our mix to, again, provide more value to our customer base. So even though we're not physically here with the location, we've been a part of this community for a long time, first with Anheuser-Busch and now with Eagle Rock. You could see those locations, Littleton, Springs, Durango, Pueblo, Denver, and Loveland, are our current facilities. So in Colorado Springs is where we service Monument as well. And we're calling on roughly close to 800 or a little over 800 customers currently. So back to this map you saw before, the 2 yellow stars are what we are consolidating. We are taking 5 warehouses and consolidating them into 2. And the reason we're doing that is, 1, the locations are outdated. 2, we're out of space. The warehouses are full and we fully plan to grow in the future. So we need to have additional warehouse space required for the growth that we will see, plus our current volume needs as we continue to add products. You've seen the footprint already. A couple, again, here's the design. of the facility, which we happen to show some of our Georgia people, and they all want to move out here now because they really like this design. Some of the exterior renderings. So building profile and impact. We will service most of southern Colorado from this facility. We'll have 100+ employees day one. We fully expect that to grow. The average salary for us, we pay our people well, $73,000. You could see the capital investment and the taxes for the area. Some of the partnerships we already have, both in Colorado, then local to Monument and Springs. Here are some of our sports properties. And then here are all the festivals and events that we are currently servicing and are part of the community. Most of the things from Springs and Monument would be on the right-hand side of this slide. Community involvement is a staple of what we do. We are only as good as the community that we are in. So we put it upon ourselves to make sure we're involved in a lot of events, not only from festivals, but giving back to the community as well. We do a lot with wounded veterans as well. And this is a letter from our Chamber of Commerce back in Atlanta, talking a little bit about our impact in that community there, if you care to reference it later. So that's a little bit about us. If you have any questions, me and my brother, Fran, who's our CFO, are happy to answer who we are, what we're about. If you have more technical questions, our team is happy to answer.
Great. Thank you, sir. At this time, we're going to go ahead and open this up for public comment. Again, Teresa, those individuals that are online, I would ask if those individuals have questions to go ahead and raise their hands, and we'll go ahead and bring them online. Inside the room here, are there any public comments associated with this Eagle Rock Distribution preliminary final PDU? Mr. King.
I'm Steve King. So I want to just give you a little bit of history on this whole entire development, Falcon Commerce Center. So we had a group with Megan, and we've been working on trying to set up some types of regulations for Falcon Commerce Center in whole, which we've made some compromises, and obviously we didn't get everything we wanted, and probably they didn't either. But I will say this. I mean, obviously this building itself doesn't really meet the comprehensive plan, right? Our comprehensive plan says smaller buildings, smaller uses with cargo vans and things like that. However, Falcon Commerce Center is a really difficult project to come up with regulations for, because it is a predominantly industrial project. And our new design standards that we'll get to later address some of the concerns that we've had, particularly around semi trucks and loading docks. And in this building, just to give you kind of an idea, it's like one semi dock. And part of what I'm saying is so they'll rebut me, because I want to find out some answers. So it's one semi loading dock per 4,000 square feet roughly. And our industrial design standards are going to alter that, providing that that gets passed, but not for this building, right? And part of the negotiation process was that this building wasn't a target from the Save Monument Group. And so we're not really targeting it, mainly because of the people that own it, their type of business, and like you said, their commitment to the community, even though it's a giant building. So I'm not here to protest it. I'm here to get you to look at what this building is and try to figure out how to address the semi-truck traffic that's going to be coming into this place. And also to kind of bring a point of the outside storage area with the outside parking spaces, hopefully not turning into storage containers or semi-trailers that sit there and are used for storage, because there's 100 and something trailer spaces. So again, I'm not here to protest that. We've made some compromises on the rest of the project down there, and this will this will be the biggest building in Falcon Commerce Center, so. So that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Teresa, at this time, are there any other comments or correction, or would you like to rebuttal, sir? Please.
So we are building this for the future as you made the comment on how expensive it is to build. Expensive. We will have tractor trailers bringing in supply. We have to climate control our product, so we won't have trailers stacked up on our property. Everything has to be housed within our facility because we have to cool the product. It's a requirement by the brewery so the product stays fresh. For us being a family-owned business, we're rapidly moving out of the CDL game because we can't compete with the Amazons of the world. So most of our deliveries, we will have some tractor trailers, but most of our deliveries will be done with box trucks because those do not require CDL. And we're able to open the pool of candidates that we can hire and not have to compete with the Amazons of the world. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Teresa, are there any other public comments? None? Thank you, ma'am. At this time, we're going to close the public comments and leave this to the commissioners for questions and comments, please. At this time, commissioners, any questions?
This is Commissioner Agley. Can you tell me how many routes will you be running out of there for delivery, since I assume that you have some feel for that with your consolidation of the other buildings?
So our plan, not all the routes, we will build more routes out of this facility than will actually be located in Monument. So we will have a cross dock in Pueblo. So to service the whole southern part of the state, those routes will stay at that cross dock, and we will load a trailer and deliver down to that cross docking facility and cross out those routes. Mike, roughly maybe 20 routes down there. Not even 16. So that would leave probably an additional 30, roughly 30, 35 routes.
And your estimate is that you'll add 100 employees for this particular location itself?
Yes.
So 30 route employees and an additional 70 for warehousing and administration, or
Sales.
sales?
So sales and delivery will be the majority of the positions, as well as management.
And then I know that you had a statement in there about some type of a connector to the Santa Fe Trail. How do you envision that connection to be made, and the impact on Santa Fe Trail as it exists now?
I'll turn that over to the team if that's okay.
Okay.
My name is Matthew Borner with Ware Malcolm, the architect on this particular project. We actually have our civil engineer, who's also Ware Malcolm, on the phone. So Dan, if you can hear me, you can probably chime in on that connection to the Santa Fe Trail better than I can. So.
I think his hand's raised.
Yeah.
You're stuck.
Just let the civil engineer do this thing.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so I believe our connection is actually on the lower southwest corner plan view. So there's a trail that the district is putting in that connects to Santa Fe Trail. So it's a pretty simple connection, but it provides that connection to the main trail system through that small connector there.
I'll just add to that. As a part of the PUD here, we are coordinating with Kiowa, the engineer for the entire Falcon Commerce Center, to tie into that trail, which actually abuts the entire development.
Okay, thank you, sir. Please.
So I'm curious, you said that you're moving to box trucks to get away from the DOT requirement of a CDL, but if it's still a box truck and you have a DOT number, doesn't that requirement still meet you?
It's not really a DOT requirement. It's a compensation requirement against Amazon. So CDL, the requirement for a CDL Class A is 26,000
Right.
pounds. So the box truck, we're under that weight.
That's all I had. I was just curious.
Commissioner Ayers, first I want to compliment you on your presentation, a great presentation for this planning commission. I do have a question. You have 100 employees and you said a lot of those will be vehicular drivers, correct? About 30%, I think you said.
30% for delivery, then you'll have sales reps that'll be in vans.
Sales reps and how many people do you anticipate that you would be hiring that'll be in the building there, working in the building? I mean, versus, and how many people will you be bringing from Atlanta? It's just a general question.
No one from Atlanta. The people from Atlanta that come out here are temporary. We have like some shared services people.
Okay.
Everyone will show up to the facility in the morning. Not everyone. Our sales reps do start from their home so they can be more efficient in the area that they're servicing. So again, we're up and down the street calling on anyone that has a alcohol license who will be in the building all day. We will have meetings, so our whole employee base will be there, but it'll be mainly sales managers, delivery managers, upper management, warehouse crew, and office staff.
So all your big administrative still occurs in Georgia primarily is what?
Yeah, we have some shared services in Georgia, but there needs to be some on-site admin as well.
Yeah, okay. I've got a question for staff. In your presentation, I read in here with regard to that roundabout.
Yep.
I read this statement, so I need somebody to help me with the statement. Sometimes I have trouble understanding statements. As of April 22nd, Colorado Department of Transportation informed the town that the Baptist Road Terrazzo Drive intersection will be constructed as a roundabout rather than a traffic signal and will be constructed within 18 months. I understand that. The roundabout will elevate the traffic concerns from the semi trucks entering and exiting Falcon Commerce Center in the pilot.
Yep.
Explain elevate to me.
Well, the issue why the roundabout is going there rather than a signal is we're worried about the queuing of these semi trucks going into the I-25 intersection. This will prevent trucks getting stuck within an intersection, within two intersections. So hypothetically, if Baptist and Terrazzo was signalized, trucks could get stuck in the middle of that intersection because of a queuing issue, and in the middle of the I-25 intersection because of a queuing issue. The roundabout will elevate that by not being stuck or having a queuing issue within that area. And so they could get through the both intersections, the roundabout intersection, as well as the I-25 intersection more freely instead of being queued behind with a stacking issue with vehicles of not just semi trucks, of passenger vehicles as well, and box trucks and whatnot, to help elevate that flow, go more smoothly, a roundabout. And that's what CDOT has informed us. And they did a study too, and they're in the process of hiring an engineering firm to design this roundabout, which will be provided to the Falcon Center property owners to keep them in the loop.
I was hoping you'd tell me.
Yeah.
Okay, but the word elevate concerned me when you have elevate and the word concern in the same phrase.
Commissioner Collins, so you're gonna have a maintenance shed on site, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, are you gonna work on just your own trucks, and are you gonna have fuel on site?
Do we have fuel on site? No. Okay. We do not the difficult maintenance of the engine, but it's just basic maintenance of the vehicle. So we will have a staff on site that maintains our vehicles, just our vehicles.
Any other questions?
Commissioner Peck, just a real quick question. If you could explain, logistically, how do you guys usually send trucks out in the morning or throughout the day? And how many number of trucks, how many like in total, how many are going out at any given moment and returning, just so that I can understand the effects?
It really depends on the customer, but typically we divide up our business into two different divisions. One's called off-premise delivery. So off-premise is anywhere a customer goes and buys the product and then consumes it elsewhere. So grocery stores, packaged liquor stores, convenience stores, where you're buying it there, but you're taking it back to your home. They usually have very early windows for delivery times. So those people, our delivery guys will leave out 3 o'clock in the morning, sometimes earlier, depending on if they have dock times they have to schedule. So, and that's the majority of our business. About 80% of our business is in the off premise. So those people are out really early in the morning, so they'll miss the morning rush. And the last thing we want to do is hit rush hour with our people to get them back. So they're usually out very early and then back early, well before the afternoon rush. The on-premise business, so think your bars and restaurants where you're consuming the product on the premise, they usually have later times. So those trucks usually leave between 6 and 7, sometimes 8 in the morning. And then we try to get them back still before that afternoon rush.
Thank you.
As the commissioner and May asked about the fuel, what is I guess, let's look at where we have the fueling point right there at Pilot and also across the street. What is the fuel plan as far as those trucks? You're saying they're all going to depart early morning. I understand the fueling in there. It's going to cause a mass grouping of vehicles. In the afternoon, again, another mass grouping of vehicles coming through those corridors. Is that the plan, is to fuel them up at those stations that are close by to the facility there?
Yes, we usually have relationships with, if we don't have an on-site tank, we usually have relationships with a pilot.
Yes, sir.
And they fuel at different times.
Yes, sir.
So sometimes we'll even run our warehouse as they're moving trucks on the premises as they're loading them.
Okay.
They'll run them up. So it's not like Amazon where they all go at the same time.
Yes.
They fill up at different times.
Perfect. My next question then is the maintenance of the trucks. Will any maintenance be done at the facility, or is that just a storage and distribution center alone?
There's on-site oil changes, a very entry-level maintenance. Our crew we will hire that have a background to do that. If there's an engine problem, we will usually outsource that to a local maintenance company.
Perfect. My last question. Colorado, and I looked at the snowfall average in Georgia, a little bit different than Colorado on certain seasons. What is your mitigation plan in relation to traveling north, as I-25 is obviously going to be a corridor that may or may not be blocked off? If in fact it is, the deliveries still have to go. What is your mitigating plan to move product further to the north, whether it be 105 or 83? And have you thought about those effects, obviously those community and those commuters that are traveling north?
Yeah, we've learned that real quick in the last year, what the snow impact is. And we run, again, we go north and up into the mountains as well. Most of what this facility will handle is Monument South. There will probably, we're not doing Castle Rock. It potentially could be Castle Rock, but right now it's everything south.
Okay.
That said, we do 48-hour pre-sale, so we have an idea of what our customer needs 48 hours prior to us delivery. During those times where we know snowfall is more prevalent, our customers are used to it as well. So they typically will buy up knowing that there could be a missed delivery because we aren't able to operate because of snowfall. So we'll move more inventory into their locations in preparation if we cannot make a delivery that they won't run out of product. So we have a logistics team that's constantly monitoring those things.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Zernico, so just looking at the architectural renderings, it looks like there's, maybe I'm reading too much into this just based on the drawings, but is this going to be kind of a retail or a welcome center type environment to where the public are going to be able to come in and see what's going on, or even potentially, I mean, there's people sitting down having drinks and stuff on couches. So, I mean, I'm just curious of what the overall picture looks like here.
Yeah, every alcohol laws are different by every state, but with the three-tier system, we cannot hold the license to distribute product and then hold another license either in a supplier or manufacturing tier or a retail tier. So this is not open to the public where we have a person out at the bar servicing people. This is for customer entertainment. If we have a King Super regional meeting, they can come to our place and then we'll have food and drinks if they so choose to participate in that. So it's more for our employees and our retailers that would come meet.
Fair enough.
Any other questions, commissioners? At this time, please request a motion to vote as specified by the applicants.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Egley. I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of Eagle Rock Distributing Company preliminary final PD plan and Eagle Rock subdivision filing number 1 based on the findings that the proposed preliminary final PUD plan and final plat is in conformance with the review and approval criteria for a preliminary final PUD plan and final plat as outlined in sections 18.03.450.d, 18.03.460D, and 18.02.260C of the Town of Monument Land Development Code.
I second.
We'll take a vote at this time. Vice Chairman Trujillo,
Yes.
Chairman, Commissioner Hours,
Yes.
Commissioner Zernico,
Yes.
Commissioner Egley,
Yes.
Commissioner Peck,
Yes.
Commissioner Collins.
Yes.
The vote is 6-0 and passed.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, we're going to go ahead and move on to the ordinance adapting industrial design standards, definitions, and use. I defer the next presentation to staff, please.
Good evening again, Commissioners. Megan Harrington. Give me 1 second here while I pull up the information for you. Nobody wanted to stay for industrial design standards.
Well, we have one.
So what we have before you this evening for consideration is an ordinance amendment that will update the Land Development Code. What I'm going to do this evening is walk through the changes to the language. The draft ordinance that was in your packet is set up sequentially based on the sections of the Land Development Code. And so it starts with use tables, goes into some language on the PUD, supplemental design standards, and then to definitions. But this evening, gentlemen, what I'd like to do is I'm going to walk through it actually almost backwards because I think it's important that we talk about the definitions that are being added. And understanding those definitions, because reading through those definitions, they're added to the land use tables, and then the design standards we'll actually discuss last. So let me make this bigger so you can read this.
Yeah, perfect. That's what I was just going to ask. If you could get that, fill the screen. Thank you, ma'am.
Imagine why. So words and terms. With this ordinance amendment, the proposal is to add the words and terms that are in red. The first one being a definition of a distribution facility. Let me see if I can make that a little larger here. And Distribution facility, a facility often utilizing cross-docking to move goods in and out quickly, a facility that is used for receipt, temporary storage, and redistribution of goods according to orders as they are received, serving as a bridge between the supplier and its customers. So that is a definition of distribution center that would be proposed to be added.
More restrictive, saying not to exceed not to exceed 20,000 pounds.
Perhaps. So let's hold that thought and let's see where the best place to put that is, if that is something that you want to add. As we kind of take a look at the language, maybe the definition isn't the best. Let's look at all the definitions and kind of think through that. Freight or truck yard is a definition that's in the code currently, and we're proposing to leave that definition, but we're going to delete or truck yard and just call it a freight yard, and remove the language related to a truck stop and fueling station, because the code already defines a truck stop, and that language already exists in the code. So really, freight or truck yard, including the language about a truck stop, seemed redundant when there is a specific definition already existing in the code for a truck stop. Trucks including tractors and trailers unload cargo on a regular basis, include facilities for temporary storage. Direct distribution to consumers does not occur. I think a freight yard is load and unload cargo. Freight yard is more related to like a train. I'm thinking you're taking the containers off of the semi truck and you're storing those containers, or this doesn't, I don't think we have this in Monument per se, but if you're taking large cargo or freight off of a train and moving it to a truck, or I guess it could be just moving it from a truck to a truck, but I think that's different than a distribution center based on the definition. I mean, I think a freight yard, a truck yard is just the coming and going without the direct distribution or the storage. Freight yard means building or cargo is stored. Building, cargo is stored and where trucks. That's a really good point. Let's look at that when we look at the other definitions and pertaining to what zones these new definitions are permitted in. Because we also added the definition of fulfillment center. Okay, we're trying to differentiate between the distribution center, which is kind of what we heard this evening, a fulfillment center being more of the e-commerce, the last mile type of facility, and creating definitions that differentiate between the two. So fulfillment center used for receiving, temporary storage, and distribution of e-commerce goods near the customer base. According to orders, activities include receiving inventory, generating pick lists, picking products, all of these different functions that occur. One-stop fulfillment site for e-commerce with services like order processing and prep, quality checking, shipping and receiving, and dealing with returned e-commerce goods. So that is the definition of fulfillment center. Rail yard for freight. In a second. Yes, and the what staff goes through when someone comes into the planning office is trying to determine what definition it best fits in. And so we would assign a definition. So yes, with these definitions, then the next part we're going to look at is the zones in which they are or are not permitted. So that will come into play when we talk about the definitions, which we're definitely not done discussing. Micro fulfillment center. So this is something through the research, again, is with the conversion of some large retail commercial centers, there's often the conversion to a micro fulfillment center. And so this definition is a small scale, 20,000 square feet or less, highly automated warehouse that serves e-commerce as well as local store pickups located in an existing store or warehouse, or a dedicated small distribution space, 20,000 square feet or less, that may include a retail component. So this is just thinking ahead of some of the uses through our research we're seeing that other communities may be struggling with, and the conversion of retail space to what is termed micro-fulfillment center was one of those. Deleting the current definition of warehouse and distribution from the code and replacing it with warehousing and distribution. A storage facility with a principal use of storing products, inventory of raw materials, parts, or finished manufactured goods for an extended period with minimal movement of goods in and out daily. Distribution is a minimal secondary use that may be provided to retailers, businesses, customers. However, direct distribution to customers is permitted only when the user is distributing their own products. This use includes moving and storage firms, but excludes distribution of e-commerce goods and fulfillment centers. Okay. That is the last one. So those are the new those are proposed definitions. So while we keep those definitions in mind of how they're differentiated, maybe we should take a look at the zone districts and perhaps either refining the language of the definitions or changing or prohibiting the uses in specific zone districts. Standard schedules. Okay. All right, so this is the schedule of standard zone districts, so basically the land use table, which tells us what zones a use is permitted with a P, conditional with the C. If it's prohibited, not allowed in the zone, there's no letter. If it's not in the table, it's not a permitted use. So adding micro fulfillment center, conditional in the commercial, permitted in a business campus, permitted in a light industrial. Is the current proposal. That's really the only change that ends up as being a commercial use. The others are industrial uses. So here's where we're looking at distribution facility. Remember, this is light industrial. This is the LI zone district. So its distribution facility is conditional only in a light industrial. It'd be prohibited in every other zone district. Fulfillment center is prohibited altogether. So the definition of fulfillment center, which was the e-commerce goods, the last mile type of distribution, that is prohibited in the town because it's not permitted or conditional in any zone district. So you can change that. You could make it conditional, similar to distribution facility. You could remove distribution facility, right? This is just kind of the starting point with staff and the citizens that we've been talking about over time. And then freight or truck yard is being treated the same as distribution facility and is conditional in the LI zone district. The other use tables thinking here. sorry, gentlemen, now my PDF stopped working. Right, let's make that bigger for you here. Heavy industrial. We haven't really touched on this as part of this discussion about distribution facilities, but heavy industrial is a definition in the Land Development Code. And anything that's classified as heavy industrial is currently conditional in the light industrial zone district. That seems counterintuitive to allow a heavy industrial type uses in a light industrial zone district. So staff is saying, let's move that from being a conditional use to just not being permitted. We'll leave the definition of heavy industrial in the code, but strike it from the land development tables. Truck stop. Okay, so here's in the table where we've added truck stops specifically. And currently, the proposal is to not allow truck stops. Well, so if it is a PUD, so these land use tables that are in the code are specific to the straight zone districts, and those are the zones that are the standard zones. The LI light industrial zone, the CC zone, is commercial, BC business campus, all of those zone districts, these uses apply to. So unless it's something that's constructed today, if this ordinance is adopted, then those uses apply to those straight zones. If it's a PUD zone, remember the PUD zoning sets the use type. And so if a PUD zone already specifies the use of truck stop or warehouse and distribution as a permitted use, changing these use tables would not restrict those uses in those already established zones. Ungrandfathering that is a completely different process. That would be if my property is zoned PUD and my PUD zone said I can have truck stops and outdoor storage. If you wanted to say, no, Megan, you can no longer build a truck stop or an outdoor storage, instead of just updating the zoning ordinance, you would actually have to rezone my property. So municipalities can do that. There is risk to that. I'm not an attorney, but the town attorney would have to advise the town on the risk of rezoning individual property owners' property. But it can be done. Three. There are 3 large PUD zoned properties. At least one of those, I believe, has a truck stop allowance in the zoning. Do you know off the top of your head? I mean, we'd have to
Well, it
look at the
depends
PUD
on
zones.
what the truck stop is. I know, you mean vacant land that hasn't been developed on, that's a PUD? Or the current ones, like if you see a truck stop, like Valero and the Pilot, they have an approved PUD that allows them to have that. So let's say Valero, it was Diamond Shamrock and they bought out by Valero. They're allowed to do that. Do that by a, not even. Yeah. Yep.
So we would have to look at each individual PUD and see what uses are permitted in that PUD. If the PUD says truck stop, so the PUD zoning ordinance is previously was typically approved with a sketch plan, and the sketch plan listed the uses that were permitted. If that PUD or any PUD lists truck stop or lists whatever those uses are, those are zoned permitted uses. And the only way to ungrandfather that would be to basically rezone. It would be a rezoning of individual properties. And we haven't gotten there yet, but there was a lot of that conversation about the PUDs. How do we deal and address with the PUDs and those uses in the PUDs? And that, I believe, is where the supplemental design standards come in. So even though I may be able to build a truck stop, that's a bad example. Let's say my PUD allows me to build a truck stop. The language in here that we haven't gotten to yet does state that all PUDs that do not have a preliminary, right? Because the preliminary PUD, that's the document that sets the zoning and design guidelines for a PUD. If there is not a preliminary PUD approved, then all of the supplemental design standards would apply. And that's where we're really looking at the overall design, the impacts. You still have all of those review criteria when you see a final PUD site plan to review to say, we may not be able to say, no, you can't build a truck stop, but we can certainly say, that there's too much parking, the circulation doesn't work, there needs to be more screening, right? Those site design elements are part of those review criteria and are part of what we're codifying with the supplemental design standards. Yes, I believe that the town can do that. We have a model traffic code. So that's a different section of code. So that could be something that could be considered, but I don't think that's in the zoning ordinance itself. And then we are rewriting the roadway design standards so that we have very clear roadway cross sections, and one of those needs to be an industrial roadway cross section, which would have there's a design of the concrete, and I mean, ensuring that it's designed and constructed to be able to handle the truck traffic as an industrial roadway.
And it's a requirement right now when they do their asphalt or concrete, whatever they decide to do for their road. And our engineering assistant inspects it. Sometimes he tells them, no, that's not right. It has to be this thickness. It's per our roadway design criteria. And they have to go back and pour another layer of asphalt or concrete out there. So he's on it, and he knows that we have semi trucks that go to Walmart and the King Supers and whatnot. The roads have to outlast those type of delivery drivers too, and deliveries to our homes via furniture delivery and Amazon and whatnot too. So, and the common traffic, and the more traffic more homes we get, the more traffic we'll have just from vehicle passenger cars too. So we do make sure that they're abiding by those standards and engineering standards. And that's why when the civil plans are submitted to the town, we send it out to our on-call engineer and our engineering assistant, and they have to abide by those standards, and it has to be set on those civil plans. Yeah.
Warehousing and distribution here, conditional in the BC Business Campus, permitted in an LI Light Industrial. It's the proposal currently. Well, you can, my hope is that you will. You have options. Board of Trustees would like something to come back to them from the Planning Commission sooner rather than later. But you have options. If you feel that it's not, and we walk through this, if you feel that it's not ready or there's changes that you want to make that can't be done here, you can postpone another month and give staff additional direction. You can vote to approve it. You can vote to deny it. You do have options. Just keeping in mind that we do want to keep, Board of Trustees does want to keep it kind of moving along, but.
Can I?
Oh, yeah.
So there's grandfathers on the current PUDs. But when somebody comes in with a request for a new PUD, we can then eliminate certain things in that PUD as far as our approval goes, correct?
Yes. So I pulled it up on the screen for you. 18.3.4.20 scope and intent of a PUD. So the language that's in the regular dark font is what's in the code currently. The red is language to be proposed to be added. Application of a PUD has to comply with this article, so we're adding C. Truck stops, fulfillment centers, and heavy industrials defined in the Land Development Code, section 1807110, words and terms are expressly prohibited in a PUD. Yes, a new PUD comes in and says, we want you to approve our PUD zoning and we want to have it approved for truck stops and fulfillment centers. We would say, no. I mean, I don't even think it would get to you because the code says it's expressly prohibited in a PUD. Industrial uses in a PUD zone shall conform to the language in section 1804-150, which are the supplemental design standards, in effect as of the date that a preliminary PUD plan is determined complete by town staff. So if I have a PUD approved zone district, but I have no preliminary PUD in yet, the supplemental design standards apply to my property. So staff would say, no, you cannot vary or waive those standards because the code says you have to follow the supplemental design standards. So that's the language that we have put in here to date.
Okay, but my point is this planning commission can go beyond what's here. If somebody comes in with a PUD and requests something that's not eliminated by this, but we say, look, based on the comprehensive plan and other things, we recommend it not be approved without this being eliminated.
Absolutely, you can. If there's a brand new PUD and they come in and want everything under the sun, and you feel that those uses do not meet the review criteria, you can say, we will not approve this PUD with these particular uses within it because it does not meet the criteria. You absolutely have the ability to do that, as well as look at the overall design at the time of preliminary PUD and final site plan. A PUD is a negotiation. Not the PUD zoning itself. I believe a preliminary PUD has an expiration and a final PUD site plan would have an expiration. So when we get to the point where you want to go vertical, so if Eagle Rock doesn't build something in longer than a year, 4 years, maybe 6. Gentleman in the audience says 2, and he's probably right. But there is an expiration of the site development plan itself. But the PUD zoning ordinance that establishes the height, the use type, the density, that does not expire. That is a zoning.
I just pulled it up from the code. For a final PUD, there's no expiration provided plat is recorded within 3 months of approval or 6 months if timely requests for extension if made within 3 months. And then for a preliminary PUD, you have a year. That was the one I just mentioned before the final. There's no expiration unless, but there's an expiration for the plat.
Okay, so we walk through the uses that are in the standard zones. Now, also remember, we have the Regency Park overlay zoning, which a majority of that is on the east side of I-25, Jackson Creek Parkway area. And the zones are very similar, but they have different names, right? PRD4, PRD6, PRD10. PCD is commercial, PID is industrial. So what we've done here as staff is just where a use is permitted or conditional in the commercial or industrial zone districts that are the standard zones, right? The commercial and the LI. We've just mimicked those uses and the allowances in the commercial and the industrial in the Regency Park overlay. So that extends past industrial uses. Actually, I was just cleaning this up. A bank is permitted in an LI light industrial zone. So why, or as conditional, why not allow a bank as conditional in a planned industrial zone? So we're just doing this type of cleanup. Micro fulfillment center is added, similar to how it's added with the other zone district. So conditional in commercial and permitted in the mixed use and the industrial zone districts.
What would a dispensary be?
What are you?
In general, what would a dispensary be? What would that be in these terms? What would a dispensary be?
A marijuana dispensary?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
They're not permitted, but I'm just looking at this table. There is a specific end inside the code that says it's not permitted, but it's, again, is there something in this table?
No, because remember, if a use is not specifically listed in the table, it's not permitted. So I think that's all restricted out through a specific section for medical marijuana dispensary. I don't know if it goes as far as dispensary, grow. Yeah, but it's conditioned out separately. And then distribution, fulfillment center, truck stop, warehousing, and distribution. These are all kind of treated the same as with the standard zone districts. We talked about the scope of intent of the PUD and that language that's added. Okay, then 1804-150. I mean, this is a majority of the language that has been discussed with staff, citizens, industrial property owners. This is like the best compromise, if you call it a compromise, that staff can come up with. There's people that agree and don't agree on probably every one of these design standards. So again, the language to be added is in red. Adjacency is already in there. We just cleaned up the language a bit. Added a whole section on traffic impact study is required to analyze types and number of daily trips of truck traffic. Semi-truck, box truck, cargo van are examples, but not limited to. And you remember Jeff Hodgson this evening even said that in a traffic study, right, he can account a semi-truck as multiple passenger vehicles, right? And so that's the type of analysis we would expect to see when submittal of an industrial project comes through, and we would point to this section of the code. Traffic projected to will not result in undue traffic congestion, traffic hazards, unsafe parking. And so a lot of this is standard with traffic studies, but we're taking it to that next step to say semi-truck traffic is discouraged, utilization of smaller, more frequent deliveries at off-peak hours is encouraged. So those are the types of elements that we would hope to see in a traffic study for a large industrial project. Circulation, access and circulation design so that loading berths are internally oriented and shared with adjacent industrial development to consolidate and minimize street access points to the maximum extent practical. Semi-truck parking, this is pretty controversial. There's probably no agreement on this. Semi-truck or oversized parking spaces are permitted at a maximum of 15 spaces for every 1,000 square feet of gross floor area of the building for which they serve. The director may vary the amount of semi-truck parking up to 15% if the parking is fully screened and the need justified based on site, location, design, and overall use. But again, remember, if the director varies the amount, it's still coming to the Planning Commission for a final PUD site plan or a site plan approval anyway. We'd probably say, this is the information that they provided and why additional spaces were allowed. But the Planning Commission could say, no, we're not buying it. It needs to be reduced, right? But that at least gives some flexibility based on location. And that was added by staff as a way to, again, reach a better compromise on the semi-truck parking. Oversized parking areas must be set back from the public right-of-way, not encroach in any required perimeter buffer areas, located behind buildings, screened from view. And then alternative compliance may be approved by the planning director on a case-by-case basis if the director determines that alternative will reduce visual or noise impacts abutting right-of-ways and residential to the maximum extent. So this is, again, a way that a property owner could come in and provide justification for a different or a new type of solution to meet this criteria. But again, it would come to Planning Commission and Planning Commission could say no, or maybe you say yes. And then semi-truck parking pertains to wheeled vehicles and not storage of cargo containers, where a container transported by a vehicle is detached from the vehicle must be moved to an approved and screened outdoor storage area within 48 hours. So you pull in with your semi-truck and you unload your cargo container. What we're trying to prevent is just the dropping of the cargo container in the spaces designated as semi-truck parking spaces. If you really are detached the cargo car from the semi-truck, then it becomes storage and it should be screened. And so we're giving 48 hours to say, the cargo container has been dropped in a parking space. Within 48 hours, another truck needs to come and pick it up, or it needs to be moved to a fully screened outdoor storage area. Maximum 50-foot wide landscape buffer shall be provided along all property lines where an industrial use is adjacent to an existing residential zone district. So tweak the language of that a bit. Screening, again, most of this is in the code currently. Fence, wall, hedge, landscape, earth berm, natural buffer area are methods of screening. Shall be screened so as not to be visible from adjacent property or public right-of-way, dumpster, trash area, service entrances, loading docks and spaces, storage docks, storage material and equipment. So those are the types of, and outdoor storage freezers are the types of on-site uses or structures that would need to be fully screened. Screening trees, that's already in the code. 1 for every 25 linear feet of property is required to be screened with evergreen. Every industrial use, unless expressly exempted by the Board of Trustees, shall be operated in its entirety within a completely enclosed structure. And then standards apply when the board grants exemption to that requirement. So basically, Planning Commission would see a plan come forward. If there was an exemption to this, it would need to meet those requirements. Prevention of road damage. Prevention of road damage, number 10, is already in the code. Roads serving heavy industrial shall be designed and built to support the maximum axle weight for vehicles serving the property on a reoccurring basis. 11 is new. Cargo containers and semi-truck trailers shall not be used for storage or any other accessory use unless approved through a temporary use permit or amended to the final plan. No junk, inoperative, or unlicensed automobiles or parts shall be permitted to be stored on the property. So that's don't drop a cargo container and start storing other stuff in it in the parking lot wherever. That's not permitted unless an owner comes in to amend their development plan, and then we look at the placement of storage buildings. A cargo container could be a storage building, but it needs to have approval of the location, landscaping, make sure it's not removing parking spaces. It needs to be reviewed by staff. Building features, a lot of conversation on buildings and building materials. There's been a conversation that there should be no metal buildings, period, within the town of Monument. Staff's actually proposing something a little different. Metal buildings or buildings which primary exterior surfaces are metal shall not exceed 20,000 square feet in gross floor area before it's determined that provisions B, C, and D below apply. And so that is attempting to just cover the small business owner that maybe wants to do a contractor's equipment yard. So contractor's equipment yard is a permitted use in a light industrial zone district. If I'm a landscape company, or I don't know, I cut down trees, I may need a small office or an indoor building to store some of my smaller equipment. And we did talk to a couple people recently that said, hey, a metal building of a small size is really all we need. And so we wrote this in to allow some limited use of smaller metal buildings. Otherwise, metal is prohibited as a primary exterior surface. And then you have to have change in building heights. Metal can only cover 20% or more of the 20% or less of the facade. It's an accent material, and then have to incorporate design elements, change in height, step back building, fenestration, changing in building material, pattern, texture, color, accent materials. So trying to have larger buildings that have good design. Loading berths and doors. Again, I think this is another area that's been pretty well discussed. Probably no agreement on loading berths and loading doors. We're defining two types of loading doors. An elevated truck dock would be one that serves more of a semi-truck. It's oriented towards a semi-truck or maybe even a box truck. Each building may contain a maximum of one elevated truck loading dock per 15,000 square feet of indoor building warehouse space, plus or minus 44 inches in height from finished grade. So that is a limit on those elevated truck docks. I have 10,000 in here, and it's got a line through to 15 with a note. It started out as 10,000. We heard people in the industry saying 10,000 is the industry standard. We had some citizens that said, hey, there's examples of municipalities that have gone with a much greater square footage. 15,000 square feet was brought up by a trustee member saying we should increase it over the 10,000. That's kind of how we got to the number 15,000. In the instance where a building has multiple tenants, each tenant is permitted a minimum of one elevated loading dock when the minimum square footage is not met. So that's attempting to say if you have a industrial building that has multiple tenants, they're split into small tenant spaces, they may need one truck dock. Ground level garage loading doors are separate. Each building may contain a maximum of one ground level garage loading door per 5,000 square feet of indoor building warehouse space. So that's garage loading door, one per 5,000 square feet of indoor building space, indoor building warehouse space, excuse me.
In addition to what they could have for the dock height,
Yes. So that would be both. You could have both. My industrial building could have the elevated truck docks, 1 to 15,000 square feet, and I could also have ground level garage doors, one at 5,000 square feet. So I could, yes, I could have both. Defines kind of what that is, and then allows each tenant in a multi-tenant building to have one ground level garage door as well. So technically, I guess if I had enough interior space, I could have one elevated truck dock and one ground level garage truck dock, but that would be it. Loading berths, doors, and bays shall follow a staggered placement on parallel building elevations and limiting cross docks. So that's the scenario where you have one door and one door, so the truck comes in, unloads it, and one comes out. This is attempting to make that that transfer a little harder by ensuring that we don't have just one door in and one door out, by somehow staggering the doors in the hopes of limiting that cross docking and that quick in and out movement of semi trucks. Rooftop mechanical equipment screening, that's already in the code currently. External effects, these are all in the code. We did add one for engine idling. Commercial trucks shall not idle longer than 15 minutes in any hour unless parked within a designated overnight parking area, such as a truck stop. Commercial trucks shall not idle within 500 feet of a residential zoned area from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. And they're still subject to the town noise ordinance. And then safety, noise, vibration, radioactivity, prevention of water pollution, abatement of air pollution. All of these are already in the code currently. A lot of these are state or federally regulated. It's going to be pretty hard for the town to regulate these. Everybody kind of acknowledges that, but they're in the code. And so staff was not trying to remove language that was already in the code. These are just good reminders. And again, if there was an issue with one of these, I think we would require a request as a town assistance from the proper state or federal department. But again, they're in here now. We're not removing them. And that brings us back to words and terms. So we've gone kind of full circle. What are we thinking? The definitions I hear you say are maybe it's hard to find clarity.
The conditions of fulfillment versus distribution, what are they? I mean, talk about that right off the bat. I'll dive in. Density has got to be addressed inside those terms.
Density of
Monument density. What is density in relation to? What is approval? I don't know how to address it.
Oh, so you're moving out of the industrial design standards and into trying to define residential density? Oh.
I'm just throwing it out. No, and that's why just something to consider, because even as we're looking at industrial designs, that's going to have a larger effect on it at some point. But like you said, that's where the meeting between Board of Trustees, the planning commissioners has got to define what that is before this thing takes off as far as density.
Yeah, and so this ordinance is truly only dealing with industrial uses. Absolutely, the Planning Commission, Board of Trustees can amend the land development code again and discuss density somehow. You've already expressed interest in looking at building height. We just never got there. It's on the list. So we can definitely add this to the list, and I know it's on several trustees' minds. I don't think it was intended to be added into this, but again, we can ensure that it's a discussion topic.
Yes, I would also put in there traffic, talking about traffic in relation to the completion of the project. But we're not talking about traffic in relation to the phase of the development that impacts the community during those phases. In this case, I would look at it as phase one would be from approval to, the inspection of tier 1 construction, whatever that is. I don't know how it's built. But obviously there's an impact on the community with those stages of development and the industrial aspect of the semis, the supplies and everything else that come into those areas. Somehow word that traffic into the industrial standards of the traffic by phases of how it affects the community. It's not addressed, it's just addressed as relation to the completion of the project.
So maybe that is something that we could add language to number 2, site features, traffic impact study required, shall analyze the types of trips, and work in here, acknowledging phase of development.
That impacts the community throughout the conditions associated with organic community, something to that effect. But somehow looking at the end result, not necessarily the result of how we got there and what they. A good example, Promontory Point going up north, when that whole area that's being built up there, you still have industrial trucks that are running up that street, hitting their brakes 5 o'clock in the morning. Again, this address would be very limiting on what they can or cannot do. But again, it's not addressed inside the industrial standards by phases.
Okay.
One more for me. Semi-truck, define what a semi-truck is. How do I say your last name again? Yeah, I was gonna mess that up. Commissioner Zuniga made the comment at, 2,600 pounds or 26,000. I think that there has got to be some limiting factor there. Because at some point, as the gentleman had referred to earlier about a box truck and what a CDOT individual through the Department of Highway can actually do, may not be the actual right answer. But I think if we put limiting factors on there, it may help and assist those city engineers with the understanding of what is that long-term goal of the production and salvaging of the roads we currently have, with that. But it could put another containment variable on the developer.
So when you say add a weight limit, and we did toss this around, weight limits vary, right? It's 26,000, right? How does a zoning code define truck weights? Is that more of a model traffic code? So when you want to put in a weight restriction, how and what would that do?
Through the industrial standards, I'm assuming that if with that weight established, it limits those individual variables that can or cannot use that area, thus in preventing, the max weight or the destruction of the roadways, the limiting factors of, the commercial use versus the residential use of those areas. We're literally defining that going in before it goes into the PUD through the industrial standards. Does that make sense?
Just going to clarify the max weight for the road can handle, or you're talking about the max weight of the box truck versus semi truck?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, so you're asking to put under 26,000 max weight, so only box trucks will go to that facility instead of a semi.
That's correct.
Okay.
Right now, that facility at Eagle Rock can really bring anything down there. Even though because again, he's going to bring the semis in to take the product, then he's going to put it into box trucks and redistribute it. So technically, it's a semi can bring everything in there as a distribution center. By identifying what is that weight by defined of a box truck, a semi, we clearly know what that limiting factor is. They're hitting a different, they got to know what they're even addressing. Right now, we're allowing everything that it's a distribution center. You could throw a semi in there. You could put a box truck because there's no weight limit in what we can or cannot do in there. Right now, we assume the Department of Highway is doing what they're doing and saying this is what the limits are.
So is the overall concern the number of truck trips or the number of the type of truck trips, or you're wanting to say no semi trucks at all, you have to use box trucks?
If a fulfillment center states X, you semi, and that's clear, it's semi and box truck. If a distribution center says you can only vehicle up to 6,000 pounds, well, that clearly restricts them strictly to a box truck. As we tear this thing down, I want to make sure that the accessibility of the vehicles is tiered down in accordance with it. So that way we don't have a mom and pop that's running a micro distribution center and we have a semi sitting in it, but it clearly doesn't rate that semi.
Okay. Okay.
I have a question. There could hypothetically, I'm coming up with a project that could happen and might not happen. It's a company that has 3 semis to move larger equipment such as, I can't think of what type of equipment would go inside the semi right off the top of my head, but it's like a mom and pop business. They need a 20,000 square foot building to put these 4 products in, and they have 4 semis that they move all this equipment, and they only come in and out of the business 2 times, 3 times a day at most. Would that limit that business for having semis at all? That little mom and pop business that will have 2 or 3 semis to move equipment to another location, and that would prevent that mom and pop business from coming.
I would say yes. And the
Okay.
reason why is because, again, we start talking density and we start tiering this thing.
Yeah.
If we don't allow for a strict understanding of what the rules and regulations are, but I'd say that Colorado Springs is right down the road.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be coarse, but I think that if we don't take this opportunity to clearly outline what those rules and regulations are by tiering it in relation to how it's set, we're just kicking the can down the road. We're going to face this problem continually.
But wouldn't you rather have the small business than a larger business come with
But
only
again,
3 semis?
But if it's tiered appropriately, I think it's going to be very restrictive for either the mom and pop or the big business.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So under the way that you guys have it worded right now here that we're about to vote on, would this allow the planning commission to case by case basis vote yes or no on your hypothetical?
Oh, just now?
Yeah, the mom and pop small business.
Yeah, you can make it, correct me if I'm wrong, Megan, if they could make it as a condition, like there, if you see something here you don't agree to and you want to change it, that could be a condition of voting.
What I'm asking is, I guess my concern is that if we start baking into the code hard no's, it removes our ability to be selective about what happens with our community in the future. So I think that we should provide language that guarantees our ability to make these decisions, but doesn't force us to, or doesn't take the agency out of the commission.
Sure.
Yes, so if it's written in the code, okay, let's use the loading docks because that's pretty black and white. If this section of code says you can only have 1 elevated dock per 15,000 square feet, if somebody wants to vary that, they're going to need to go to the Board of Adjustments. However, when you see a final site plan come through, you also have, 11 or 13 somewhat subjective review criteria that they still need to meet. And a lot of those deal with overall design, circulation, is the use compatible? And so sometimes those types of negotiations still happen with staff before they even get here to you to say, it doesn't quite meet that subjective criteria. And so you're right to a point where if you write it into the code, it's very hard to vary it. And some of it needs to be in the code. I don't know how far you want to go with it, right? But if it's in here, you can't just condition it out, because at that point, right, it's written into the code. I think it's harder to vary out unless we change our Board of Adjustments, or perhaps I think if the Planning Commission would sit as the Board of Adjustments and it comes through with a variance and a site plan, right? I mean, now we're kind of packing on the process.
The reason I bring it up is because I agree with you. Wanting to protect the feel of Monument is important, but take Lyman, for example. It's a small town, but I know a very specific case that's in line with your hypothetical, that he hauls cranes, got giant cranes, and his warehouse, his metal building is on his property, clearly visible from the road. And so I just get a little bit concerned. I think there does need to be a conversation with the Board of Trustees about some stuff, densities and things like that. Absolutely. But I just, when it comes to putting hard limits on things where we still have the ability to vote yay or nay on it, and it will come to us and we will be able to make those decisions, I would like for us to retain our freedom. If that, I don't know, maybe I'm taking that a step too far, but
I think it's a valid point, but the problem, I think, after years of being on the board and looking at it in relation to the wiggle room that the builder has, that's the hard part. Sitting here and saying, okay, well, this is a condition I'd like to see, but again, in the end, it still meets code. But without those hard line aspects, you're right. I mean, the mom and pop place, I understand why they're doing what they're doing. But at some point, when's enough enough? And that's been my heart of hearts, the understanding of how do you control that? I mean, we've in the last 2 years kicked the can many a time of, but again, it's the meeting between, and Megan, thank you for getting that lined up between the Board of Trustees and us at the Planning Commission, because I don't see the same vision that the Board of Trustees sees. I see as our job is speaking for the community in relation to, okay, slow the process down. Are we growing too quickly? Where the Board of Trustees may be seeing it as, we need revenue, let's bring more in. So is there a conflict there in understanding what the community even feels is necessity here in the community? I don't know that to be true. So that's why, again, I'm looking at it more from that hard line to say, okay, are we the final frontage to hold the hard line with a standard to say, okay, enough is enough.
That's fair.
Yeah. So again, I'm not debunking what you're saying. I see that, but it's right now there's nothing there, and the opportunity to provide something for us as a board is apparent. But again, that's why I asked the question going in. Do we have to make a decision tonight?
Well, so Commissioner Trujillo, this is a public hearing item, and so maybe suggestion, you want to take a break from your conversation. You could ask if there's anybody here that wants to speak to this item as part of this public hearing process, kind of get that out of the way. Then you could continue your conversation a little bit more. But at the end of all of this, I'm going to ask you gentlemen what you want to do. Adding some language about phasing to the traffic section, that is easy. You could take a 10-minute break. I'm sure I could draft something up, put it in front of you, and move this forward with some amended language. The semi-truck, the weights, all of that, not going to get done tonight. That's going to put a pause in this for a month. There's, the conversation is, hey, why is it taking so long? Why can't we just adopt something? We went through a pretty lengthy process with, both sides, citizens and industrial owners, and kind of landed here. So the questions to be thinking of is this a good start? Do you want to pause it for a month? If you pause it for a month, that pauses it. You're not getting to the Board of Trustees until July, if that. And we could bring something back to you that you still don't like as far as language. So at the end of all this, I'm just kind of thinking we're going to have to make an official action of some sort. But you may want to also ensure that we hear the public here, because I know there's at least 3 people here in the audience that would like to speak to this item.
Megan, can I ask a quick question? If we were hypothetically to approve this evening, is there anything that precludes us from coming back 6 months from now and saying we need to revisit that particular section and change that?
No, you can change it at any time. In fact, you could bring something forward to the Board of Trustees. They could make changes. You can make changes here tonight. They could make changes. You could revisit it in 6 months. You can even unofficially adopt something and tell staff to bring you a report on how is it going in 6 months or something as a reminder to staff. So yes, you have all those options.
Does the public have any comment in relation to any of the conversations in which we had so far?
This has been a lengthy process. So let me, oh, Steve King. Okay. Let me kind of start with some of the points that you brought up. All right, regarding truck stops. Okay, so there is a specific definition for truck stops, as I've been educated many times from Megan. And a fueling station is not a truck stop, even though I consider it a truck stop. So a truck stop would be overnight facilities and things like that, right? As far as I know, Falcon Commerce Center has the ability to do truck stops, but they're realistically probably not going to have any more down there. And Connexus does not. And and I don't think anything along Jackson Creek Parkway does. So I think the truck stop is pretty much over with. Now, fueling stations might be a different story, okay? Now, getting towards your comment on the weights of the trucks. We did have that conversation a lot, but the regulation really is the loading docks and the types of use. That's really what regulates the semi-truck traffic, because you can't get away from all of it, because grocery stores need semi-trucks, right? And this predominantly spells out existing zone districts. PUDs are different, and existing PUDs already have uses in, as Megan stated. So you can't regulate the use in existing PUDs, but you can regulate the design standards, and that has the same effect. Because otherwise you can rezone, which isn't a good idea, or you can do overlay districts, which will overlay a particular district and spell out the uses in that overlay, which is also basically a rezoning, also can be considered a taking, and definitely is going to get us sued. And I'll also start off by saying when the planners come to you with a PUD or any kind of zoning change, which would ultimately be a PUD, the recommendation from the planning department doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good idea. It means it meets certain criteria and they can present it to you. So you have plenty of options, especially with the rezoning, because PUDs are negotiations, and technically they want more uses, a mix of uses. They want leniency in the existing code. Usually it's in exchange for some type of amenity for the town, and that can be a lot of different things. So, and when we talked about a little bit about if somebody wants to change these standards, that it becomes a variance, I'll tell you flat out, if home rule passes, you guys are going to be the Board of Adjustments. Okay, so it creates an additional layer of potential problems for you guys if in fact that's what happens. So ironing these out ahead of time is probably the thing to do. But this is a pretty good document. Obviously, you know, we didn't get everything we wanted. The landowners didn't get everything they wanted, and in some cases, some of this stuff might not work and might have to be revisited. It's difficult to say, but we had to start someplace, and everybody had input, including the trustees. And you know, they brought up some last minute changes, but I think if Megan can scratch something out in 10 minutes as far as, you know, the phasing of traffic studies or however you want to do that, I think this document is pretty complete already. So that would be my 2 cents worth. These gentlemen behind me probably have different things to say.
Thank you, Steve. Gentlemen, do you have any other comments?
My name's Tom Blanc. I represent Fountain Commerce Center, the owners and developers of Fountain Commerce Center. So Eagle Rock is going to be a tenant in our park. And so we've been working with Steve and town staff and other citizens to address the concerns that are obvious that the Connexus development brought to the floor, you know, last August or September, I guess. And so our personal opinion about this and changing the code is that it's unnecessary. And so what's happened is when Connexus came forward, it brought out a lot of civic opposition, obviously, with respect to industrial and semi-truck traffic. And what it's done is, you know, kind of forced everybody to take a look at it and look at it, the town as a whole. And so there's 3 key parcels, 3 owners, essentially, on the west side of I-25. So Fountain Commerce Center, which is us, Santa Fe Park, which is Greg Anderson and Thompson Thrift are partners on that deal. And they have about 45 acres, give or take. And then north of that is the Connexus development. So our development's about 224 acres in gross. We've sold some to Pilot and UPS, et cetera. And I think the Connexus development is a little over 200 acres. They had 2 phases. And so Connexus has already come before you guys. You guys have already resolved through their PUD what was going to be allowed. And so we were encouraged by that process. And so we met with Steve and others to try to present some compromise solutions to address, you know, how do we limit industrial in town? It's clear that people don't want it now. Times change over time. The zoning for our property, which has always had industrial, has been there for 35 years. We've owned it for about 25 of those 35 years. We've always planned to do industrial, made, you know, certain decisions about water and sewer and things of that nature, real capital investments about having some level of industrial development in the park. And so for us, we want to preserve that flexibility. But we've now submitted to the town as of March 31st, a preliminary PUD, which would be some sort of compromise solution, which we've talked to Steve and Save Monument Group about, to try and reduce the amount of potential industrial development, trying to listen. We'd rather not give up that flexibility, quite frankly, but we've heard what the people have had to say. So we're trying to make that compromise solution. What's before you is really an opportunity to really restrict things. So, for example, if this were passed today, or I'd say a year ago, and Eagle Rock came, the Eagle Rock deal's been around for about a year. If they came before you and this was already in place, based on what was proposed, kind of a death by 1,000 cuts, you never would have seen them. And they're a great company. I think you heard them speak tonight. You unanimously supported them, but you never would have seen their deal because of the restrictions that are put in here that are effectively prohibiting that development. And that's the goal, is to prevent industrial development from the Save Monument Group. So again, we've tried to reach a compromise. Connexus had a much different scenario. That's a much different piece of ground. Ours was already developed. UPS has already been approved. Pilot's already been approved. UPS will be open in a month or 2. And we had made significant capital improvements based on that industrial development. So it's hard for us to turn around. It's not just a raw piece of ground. It's out there. And so our sense was, now that all of the developers, I believe Santa Fe Park has come to the town as well to try to negotiate their PUD. So everybody's kind of followed Connexus and said, okay, well, how do we work together, find a compromise solution? And so we've done that. We're hopeful to get approval. We got to go through the process. You'll see me again in a month or so when we get to that point. And then Santa Fe Park, I believe, is coming through as well. Connexus is taken care of. Brett, who's here tonight, represents the only other property with industrial zoning on the east side of I-25. A much smaller piece. I'll let him speak to that. But effectively, you can control all this through the PUD. And the PUDs, this is very common around the country, developed all around the country, are just for this. When you have a large development piece of ground, like 200 acres like us, you give that developer traditionally some flexibility on uses and what they can do. And then as individual developments happen, you come before the plan commission, ultimately the board, and seek that approval. But again, my point would be that if what ultimately gets approved from the code perspective of what's being proposed, you never would have seen an Eagle Rock deal. And I think that'll be a great deal for the town. You heard about the jobs and how well they pay, and it's a family business. And but that deal is something you never would have seen. So it's those sort of what I call unintended consequences that weigh heavily. So we're against what's being proposed. We would just suggest that the PUDs continue to be negotiated, because in this case, this wouldn't be true of all towns or cities, but there's 3 big parcels of ground that have the industrial zoning. One's already been taken care of. The other 2 are working through that negotiation. And that's how we would recommend to best do it. So take any questions if you want, or I'll turn it over to Brett if he wants to speak.
I got one question.
Sure.
Do you live in Monument?
I do not.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you, sir.
Brett Benke again, CSI and Development. Say, I mean, there are several items that this ordinance proposes that I don't see a problem with. I don't see a problem with the materials. I think every project that we build and try to build is a great looking project. I don't have a problem with some of the noise and screening and so forth. But there are a couple items that I would like to kind of bring up for your consideration. As Tom alluded to, we do have 2 sites that are currently zoned PID. They've been zoned PID since the 1980s. Are 5 and 7 acres near Higbee and Jackson Creek Parkway. You know, industrial projects employ personnel, and you know, NAOP, the National Association of Office of Industrial Properties, estimates an average of 250 or 1 employee per 250 square feet. You know, these like the Eagle Rock project that was in front of you tonight. I mean, it's at least 100 employees. Everyone wants to see, you know, more retail, more restaurants, but you know, we've put in retail and restaurants into Monument Marketplace. We've seen Chili's come and go. We've seen Chinese restaurants change hands a number of times. We need more daytime employment to support these retail and restaurant uses. I did, in addition to the project that was presented tonight, the Eagle Rock, I would like to show you guys. So, and I think my main point that my main concern that I'll try to kind of harp on a little bit, as you saw with the Eagle Rock project, I believe Steve King mentioned that it's 1 loading dock per 4,000 square feet. So the industrial ordinance in front of you states 1 per 15,000 square feet. The projects that I'm put in front of you, Taylor Farms is a project that we developed in Colorado Springs. It's around 82,000 square feet. It has 17 loading docks. They deal with, you know, produce and like cold storage and distribution of those items. 17 loading docks for 82,000 square feet is 1 per 4,800. The other example I've shown is one that would be in planning, but that's 36 loading docks per almost 80,000 square feet, which is about 1 loading dock per 2,200 square feet. So there's a reason that properties are built this way. You know, these are industry standards, and then reducing this ratio to 1 to 15,000, it would be detrimental. It would limit function and efficiency, resulting in lower quality facilities, users, businesses, reliable jobs, and revenue streams for the owners and for the town. So business campus, so the comprehensive plan shows the two sites that we have along the parkway as business campus. And business campus is defined as manufacturing, assembly, and fabrication. If all activities are contained within a structure and screened from view from the street and from the I-25 corridor. So the proposed uses, or these examples of uses, would fall under those under this comprehensive plan, and and then further limiting, semi-truck traffic, prohibiting semi-trucks would be disastrous for businesses and the cost that you guys have to pay for goods, that I pay for goods. I don't want that. So. Also, as Tom mentioned, I mean, the other sites have all kind of gone to a PUD. And I think you should ask the question of, well, what is the standard that they went to? And I guarantee that none of them are at 1 per 15,000 square feet. So if we take this, 1 to 15,000 feet, it's just kind of disastrous and disastrous to these businesses. So I just don't think governing industrial developments by limiting loading docks is a good way of doing it. I think you can focus on building height, lot coverage, setbacks, screening requirements, limiting outdoor storage, noise. So, and PID includes restrictions on most of those. So, and then lastly, PUDs are a good way to make modifications. But the way that this ordinance is written, if your PUD for an industrial project doesn't meet the ordinance requirements or standards in this ordinance, then it wouldn't be approved. So that's all I got. I appreciate your consideration.
I have a question for the staff real quick. I'm just curious about, there's the 15,000 square foot number did come from the Board of Trustees, right? It was a compromise between the 10 and the 20.
It was a deliberate discussion with the Board of Trustee members, where one trustee said, let's increase that to 15,000 square feet. And it appeared that other trustees were in agreement with a head nod. And so that's when staff changed the number from 10,000 to 15,000.
But the industrial standard is 10. Is that correct?
So we've heard industrial owners and those that develop industrial properties state that the standard of the industry is 1 to 10,000.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, 1
as a minimum.
1 to 10,000 as, yes.
Okay, and
as
the
as a minimum. Like
Board of Trustees wanted to go to 1 and 15,000.
They wanted to go to 1 and 15. We also started with 1 to 10,000 because the Connexus PUD development, the preliminary PUD plan that was approved by Planning Commission and Board 2 months ago, their design standards included something similar to this, set at 1 per 10,000. And so that's another reason why staff had originally started saying, okay, well, let's look at this around this 1 to 10,000. And then yes, it was increased to 1 to 15.
Any other questions, gentlemen? Please.
I got comments, but
I got one question for you. You know what it is? Do you live in Monument? Colorado Springs. Thank you, sir. At this time, we're going to go ahead and close public comment for the final considerations of the commissioners. Please, Danny.
Commissioner Hours. Points that gentleman made are very good points, but I think that the Planning Commission needs to keep in mind that the reason we're here looking at this ordinance is because back in August, our trustees had a meeting which 1,000 plus citizens showed up And they basically were saying, his point is right with regard to development, but they said, we don't want that kind of development. Okay. And that's why we're here looking at this, not. Our intent is not, I don't think our intent has ever been to dissatisfy anybody, but at the same time, we have a community that wants the community developed in a certain manner, wants that community to look a certain way. This ordinance has gone through so many iterations. And, you know, I've been in positions where we had to build plans. You build plans. I don't know the background of all of you, but if we look for the perfect plan, we are never going to get anything done. And even though this is limiting what that gentleman spoke about, and he's exactly right, it's limiting that, but that's what our citizens said that they wanted. And that's what the commissioners, the Board of Trustees, said we need to go through and see how we can design an ordinance that will permit us to give our citizens or come close to giving our citizens what they want. So I think I do. So that's my comment on that. But the one gentleman made a comment that if this ordinance was passed, was in place, that the project that we just approved, which is a very nice project down there, would have never been approved. What all in here? Can we summarize what all is in here that would have killed that project?
The loading docks, the one per 15,000 square feet. I believe there's significantly more loading docks than that. One per per 4,000. There's cross docks, or what we're referring to in this draft is cross docks, one coming in, one coming out. Those are on the building. Building size wasn't it? They had good materials, good design. I think those are the, without kind of looking at the plan, those are the big ones. The docks, the number of docks, and the locations of the docks, I think, are the big ones. Semi truck parking. Thank you. Semi truck parking.
Let me make another comment. What we have south of Baptist Road and what we have north of Baptist Road are two different things, in my opinion, within our community. We already have well-packed south of Baptist Road, so many large structures with semis coming in and out that I wouldn't want to see us put in an ordinance that would further reduce that. I don't see how we can increase it that much more, but that area down there is not the same as what you have when you get in your vehicle and you drive north on Old Denver Highway. It's a different environment. Is there a way to exempt that area south of Baptist Road? I think everything that I've heard in here with regard to north of Baptist Road is what our citizens want. I'm not sure that our citizens want such a restriction that we can't get businesses come in here that's going to give us employment and give us a tax income, base income. And that area south of Baptist Road, I think, is unique in that respect.
I'm going to look to Debbie and then towards Mr. Blunk. There's a preliminary PUD plan in for Falcon Commerce Center, correct? Okay, so based on the language that's in there currently, a preliminary PUD plan that sets the design standards and zoning for the Falcon Commerce Center is already in and submitted. And so where we have the language of it needs to be deemed complete, it's already being reviewed under the old code, so this wouldn't apply anyway. Based on that PUD language as it exists, that is basically grandfathering any preliminary PUDs that have been submitted and accepted as complete prior to the adoption of any new ordinances.
You're talking south of Baptist Road.
And I'm talking specifically of the Falcon Commerce Center. Falcon Commerce Center has an application in for review currently, separate from Eagle Rock, that is a new PUD.
It's a preliminary PUD for phase 2. Phase 1 was Quick Trip and UPS. That was phase 1. So phase 2 is in, and it will be with the current code.
So what you're telling me, for the purpose of this conversation, if they came in with a duplication of what we just approved tonight, we wouldn't have a problem down there.
I don't think so, because that preliminary PUD that's under review is setting the design criteria specifically for that project. I think Mr. King referenced, we've been having conversations with Falcon Commerce Center and the citizens about what that preliminary PUD looks like. It's been sent out to the citizen group. So yeah, that property is already under review.
The people just want the reduction of semi-traffic through our city, our main city. And I think this is restricting it as much as it can be. Like I say, there's no such thing as a perfect plan. Sure. And so that's my comment at this point.
Yes, sir. At this time, are there any other comments associated with the conversation which we're having right now on the rework and redesign of the industrial standards within the Planning Commission? At this time? Yeah. At this time, I defer to staff. Are there any additional comments?
No, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, I would refer to the board. Are there any additional inclusions that need to be placed in from our discussions? Any comments?
Well, I just recommend as the director suggested, I need a break for a couple of reasons. One, to give her an opportunity to make some, but that she come back with some specifics related to our conversation. And then I just really recommend that this planning commission go forward with a very solid recommendation so the Board of Trustees can approve something and get this matter set aside and maybe revisit it at some point.
Perfect. Completely understand. At this time, what we'd like to do is take a break for about 10 minutes, give the planning director an opportunity to go and revise some of the individual wording. And then from there, we'll reconvene for the final motion in order to approve it. At this time, we're going to take a 10-minute break and we will start at this time.
advisory, just because it connects to the. Are you ready? So it's advisory, not anything.
All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and reconvene at this time with the Planning Commission meeting for today, 5/11 of 2022. At this point, I'm going to defer back to staff to see the final recommendations on, so we can go ahead and come forth with a motion.
Okay. Talked about phasing, ensuring that all phases, individual phase impacts as well as cumulative impacts are addressed. And so I am hoping this starts to get close. So this is in the traffic design standard for the traffic. The traffic impact study required as part of the application shall analyze types of and the number of daily trips of truck traffic, semi-truck, box truck, cargo van are examples, but not limited to, and relationship to delivery times and impact on peak hour traffic. If the project is proposed to be built in phases, each phase shall be analyzed individually as well as the cumulative impact on the surrounding roadways. Semi-trucks are discouraged for utilization of smaller, more frequent deliveries. Off-peak hours are encouraged. Traffic projected to be generated by the industrial use to include individual phases shall not result in undue traffic congestion or traffic hazards, unsafe parking, loading service, or internal traffic conflicts to the detriment of persons on or off site. The projected types, weight, and size of vehicles generating traffic as a result of the industrial use shall not overburden or denigrate the capacity of existing streets in a manner that exceeds other uses permitted in the zone district. Whew. That's a mouthful, but that's that was the easy language solution to add to ensure that the phasing is addressed in a traffic study.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, I'd like to go to the commissioners to identify a motion to approve the draft in which we had just conferred upon. Commissioners.
Mr. Chairman, it's Commissioner Egley, and I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of an ordinance updating the Town of Monument Land Development Code to revise the industrial use tables, supplemental use standards, and definitions.
Oh, Commissioner Egley, with the adjusted language added to the traffic study section?
Thank you. With the adjusted language added
wonderful.
to the traffic study.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Okay, we will now take a vote. Vice Chairman Trujillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Hours,
Yes.
Commissioner Zernico,
No, I believe it's too restrictive.
okay, Commissioner Peck,
Yes, but I'd like to make a comment that I do believe that it is beginning to stray into an overly restrictive area. And I also feel that there's a possibility that that 15,000 square foot compromise was come to, I don't want to use the word arbitrarily. I don't want to insult the Board of Trustees or anything like that. But I think maybe some investigation into what kind of industries that limits us to should happen. That's all.
Commissioner Collins,
No, because I think the loading docks are too restrictive.
okay, it is 4-2 and motion passes.
Go ahead.
Can I make a couple of comments?
Please.
I'd like to make two comments. For the benefit of the Planning Commission and then for the benefit of the citizens, but Mr. King, Steve King made a comment that I think is very appropriate for us as planning commissioners to understand. He made a comment that the staff presents to us approved projects that meet the code and related criteria, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they agree with everything's in there, but they have no choice but to bring those to us. But we as a commission have the opportunity to look at everything and to put within reason conditions on that. It's essentially what he said. And I don't think that we ever need to forget that, because there are things that come up here that they've approved that we don't like, and it doesn't mean that we can't put a condition on it if it's within reason. And I think that's a very important point that needs to be made. The other comment I'd like to make, that as I like our departing director to authorize that the minutes for this particular item on the agenda be written in more detail than is required by minute writing. And there's two reasons for that. One, the citizens need to understand what this process has gone through. And currently, the paper that publishes to the citizens what goes on in this meeting is being written based on what is written in the minutes. Very plainly, the last two papers that I read said that they were reporting on the Planning Commission based on the minutes that were well, they're doing it. They're doing it. And what I'm saying, whether they're not supposed to do that or not, I think this subject is a very important subject to our citizens. And I think the citizens need to know that we just didn't sit here and arbitrarily say things without discussion and looking into it hard. That's all I'm saying.
Which is part of what recorded that reason.
But
And we don't have a dictation. I mean, we'll get as detailed.
you understand what I'm saying? Okay, good. And then the other thing, the trustees, they're going to see the preliminary minutes. And that I think they need to have more input from us on this subject, on this agenda item.
Thank you, sir. All right. With that vote, obviously, we are now set for non-agenda, or correction, we've already done the voting. Thank you, Teresa. Non-agenda public items, land development only. Do we have any of those, staff? Non-agenda items.
Nope, don't have anything for you. We're more than likely have a meeting in June. We're just trying to wrap some projects up to make sure they meet the deadlines. And this hearing tonight for industrial standards will be going to the Board of Trustees on July 5th.
Thank you, ma'am.
Instead of June.
Perfect. And last piece, reports, communications, and announcements from any of the commissioners. None on the right, none on the left. Yep, we already did that. Yeah, that's what she just mentioned. For land development, correct. Do we have any non-agenda public comments from the public? None? Nope. Yes, sir. All right, so reports, communications, announcements, obviously none from the commissioner. Any from the planning staff? None. We do have one for the final piece. As we know, Megan Harrington, this is your last day here. We want to say thank you for everything you've done on behalf of all the commissioners. So what we did was get you this little device here. And on this, it's from the town of Monument. It says Planning Director Megan Harrington, in honor and with deep appreciation for serving as the Planning Director for the town of Monument, Colorado. From June 21 to April 22, you have served with the highest standard of excellence and integrity. You are an example of inspiration to all of us. Wishing you all the best in your future endeavors. Monument Planning Commission 2022. Well, thank you.
Here we're hugging it out. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am. There's no crying in planning, planner. You're very welcome, ma'am. Thank you for all you do. And again, folks, at this time, if there's no other comments, we will adjourn the Planning Commission for today. We're gonna, no more, how many more comments, Dan? One more comment. Please.
No, the comment I want to make is I found out that the young lady sitting there on the end of the staff was recognized as an employee of the year.
Yeah, that was at Christmas.
Huh? That's right, but the word never got out. I don't know how many commissioners knew that, but she was named the employee of the year.
I apologize. We should have mentioned that. I didn't think about that.
Hard to toot my own horn.
Well, yeah.
I don't usually do that.
I'm trying to toot it for you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Employee of the Year. At this time, we thank you for everything, and we thank you for your time this evening. Sorry for the elongated Planning Commission meeting at this point. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our Planning Commission for May 11th, 2022. Thank you.